Carl Tanzler loved Elena de Hoyos. He positively adored her. He loved her slender figure, her gentle smile, the way she laughed. He loved her Cuban features and heritage, which reminded him of an entrancing couple of days he had spent in Cuba on his way from Germany to the U.S. He loved to gaze into her wide, trusting eyes. He frequently bought her gifts from various little stores in their small, eccentric town of Key West, Florida. Stuff like fancy jewelry and clothing, things that her family couldn't afford to buy her. Whenever he wasn't with her, he imagined traveling with her, bringing her to all these fantastic places he had seen during his many, many travels in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. Despite his status as a married father of 2, Carl firmly believed that the much, much younger Elena was the girl of his dreams. And I mean that literally. He truly believed she was the girl he had seemingly been dreaming about since he was a kid, dreams he considered to be visions. Visions heavily influenced by his mother's stories about this supposed spirit called the White Woman, who had supposedly haunted his family's estate in Germany for many years. From the moment Carl saw Elena, he knew that she had to be his. She had to be. It was destiny. There was just one problem. Well, there were 2 problems, actually. The first problem was that he was, as I mentioned, married with kids. The second, arguably even bigger problem, was that Elena was dying, and dying fast. She had tuberculosis, the most deadly disease in human history. It is estimated to have taken well over 1 billion lives. By the dawn of the 19th century, tuberculosis, or as it was known then, consumption, had killed 1 in 7 of all people who had ever lived. Victims suffered from hacking, bloody coughs, debilitating pain in their lungs, and fatigue. Not a pleasant way to go. In 1882, Robert Koch's discovery of the tubercle bacillus revealed that TB was not genetic, but rather highly contagious. It was also somewhat preventable through good hygiene. As the medical community came to accept that tuberculosis was contagious, officials launched public health campaigns to educate people on how best to protect themselves. In 1943, under Dr. Selman Abraham Waxman's supervision, Rutgers University graduate student Albert Schatz discovered the bacteria that would later create the antibiotic streptomycin, a huge breakthrough in TB treatment, which would pave the way for later even better antibiotics that the virus was less resistant to. But that treatment would not come nearly soon enough for Elena de Hoyos. Elena died on October 25, 1931, at the age of only 22, and Tanzler was devastated. The woman he had been searching for his entire life, the woman of his actual dreams, was gone, slipped out of his grasp like she had been no more than smoke. Of course, she hadn't actually vanished, as almost every person alive does if they don't spontaneously combust or actually disappear. Elena had left behind her body, which under normal circumstances would be prepared for burial and interred at a local cemetery where it steadily would rot and turn into bones and eventually into dust. But Tanzler's love, it didn't adhere to normal circumstances. Soon, Tanzler was convinced that Elena was calling out to him from beyond the grave, that she wanted him to protect her body from decay, to take care of her, that they could still have the life he had always dreamed for them, the traveling, the gifts, the togetherness. He started to believe that he could preserve her body so well that the illness that had ravaged her, that had taken her life, could actually be reversed. He started to believe that he could resurrect her. Tanzler just needed 2 things to make this happen: Elena de Hoyos' body, of course, and somewhere where they could be alone, where he could perform his experiments. Oh, and maybe he needed a 3rd thing, like an actual miracle. Against all the odds, he would get exactly what he wanted, except for the miracle, and except for the resurrection. But he would get the body, not for a month, not for a year, but for over 7 years. The incredibly strange story of Carl Tanzler's undying love for the dead right now on this incredibly romantic, loving, tender, or maybe incredibly disturbing, delusional, and psychotic edition of Timesuck.
This is Michael McDonald, and you're listening to Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
Well, happy Monday. Welcome back to the Cult of the Curious. Happy 4th of July if you are a space lizard hearing this early, or hope you had a good 4th of July if you're not. I'm Dan Cummins, a Suckmaster, necrophile shamer, work in progress, and you are listening to Timesuck. Hail Nimrod, hail Lucifina, praise be to good boy Bojangles, and glory be to Triple M. Wanted to give one of the final reminders this week that tickets are still on sale for Wet Hot Bad Magic Summer Camp 26, the Hoedown Showdown, the final camp. Thursday, September 10th, 2026, through Sunday, September 13th. Thanks so much to the people who have bought tickets already, many of them recently. Definitely have more than enough people coming to have an awesome time. Go to badmagicproductions.com if you want to get tickets, same place you go to for merch. And thanks to all those who do continue to get their merch there. Ton of fun designs. Tickets will no longer be for sale as of August 1st. So time is running out to join us if you are thinking about it. And that's it for camp. Just realizing now that this is the second topic in a row that strongly relates to necrophilia. Oh, whoops. Or for some of you creeps, oh, fuck yeah, bro. Let's go. About time this fucking podcast found a true theme to stick with. Maybe we'll learn more about how to create a zombie baby this week. Who knows? Let's find out. All right, first off, let's learn about the funerary practices that help lead to Tanzler keeping a corpse for as long as he did and entertaining the notion that he could bring her back to life. Before we jump into our timeline and cover this his story properly, have you ever been to an open casket funeral? I haven't been to one in many years. Not since the incident. Not since the since the funeral for my cousin Katie, my sexy cousin, first cousin Katie. Not since I wasn't, not since I was warned. I wasn't warned, I guess, rather that she was going to be buried in a tight little perfect black dress. Not since she was buried in that little push-up bra. What was I supposed to do? Not squeeze them? Keep my pants on? I was set up. I don't have a cousin Katie, and I've never been to an open casket funeral, not once. Still have never seen a corpse in real life, which is fucking crazy considering how much I've talked about corpses here over the years. That being said, I am in no hurry to see one. I'm good. I'll take your word for it, what they look like. I've seen pictures on the internet. For some people, open caskets are the norm. They give people the opportunity to see their deceased loved ones one last time as they were in life, more or less. Probably a little bit quieter, I'm guessing, than they were in life. A little stiffer, hopefully. But at least some approximation. Gives them the chance to potentially lay them to rest in an outfit they loved or with things that were important to them before it's time to say goodbye. Kind of a one-sided goodbye, but still, it's emotional. Some families are resolutely closed casket families like mine. We don't need to see your face again. We got plenty of photos. And you're even smiling with your eyes open, your real eyes in a lot of them. And you don't look like a zombie, and hardly any of them, so we're good. For some families, it depends on the situation. After all, open casket funerals are often easier on mourners if the deceased body is, in relatively decent condition. If they've suffered an accident that impacted their physical body significantly, or if their body was not discovered for a couple of days or a couple of weeks or months, that can open the door to a lot of trauma. But how do bodies, become ready to be buried at all? It's not something most of us probably spend a lot of time thinking about. When someone we know is sick, for instance, we naturally focus on spending the most amount of time we can with them, pushing the question of what comes next to the back of our minds. But if you have helped plan a funeral, you know that there's a lot more that goes into it than simply sticking them in the ground. Indeed, when people die, they leave behind a life that must be legally and administratively closed out. An official declaration of death is the first step to getting a death certificate, which is a critical piece of paperwork. If your loved one died in a hospital or nursing home where a doctor was present, the staff will handle this. But if your relative died at home, especially if the death was unexpected, you'll need to get a medical professional to declare them dead. To do this, call 911 soon after your loved one passes and have them transported to an emergency room where they can be officially declared dead and moved to a funeral home. If your family member died at home under hospice care, a hospice nurse can declare them dead without a declaration of death. You can't plan a funeral, at least not legally. You can't legally bury or cremate a body without specific permits, much less handle the deceased's legal affairs. Now, ideally, you've had an opportunity to talk with the deceased about what they want, whether that's as vague as they want to be buried or as specific as they want the Macarena played as they are lowered into the ground. Or as I have clearly specified many times, you would like to be laid to rest in an animatronic exoskeleton. And then right before your casket is lowered into the ground, Michael Jackson's Thriller starts to play loudly. The casket opens. Your body is raised up by some sort of hydraulic contraption. Your animatronic suit is then activated by the DJ playing the music, and you start dancing your motherfucking dead ass off. Now, as a backup, as a plan B, I would, of course, be open to having my body launched towards a target via a massive catapult. And if I hit that target, well, then naturally, everyone present gets a free car. Load the Dan! Aim the Dan! Fire the Dan! And yes, I would like to have my funeral sponsored. However, if the deceased has not laid out a specific burial plan, you'll need to choose a funeral home and decide on specifics like where the service will be, whether to opt for cremation, where the body or ashes will be interred, what type of tombstone or urn to order. And all of this can get pretty expensive. Not like animatronic choreography expensive or massive corpse catapult expensive, but still pretty costly. The average cost of a funeral with a casket and burial has risen to $8,300 approximately as of 2023. Furthermore, the average funeral with cremation, bypassing the cost of a casket and other preparation measures, still costs around $6,280. You can't just legally throw them in a fucking fire pit in the backyard for some reason. The most important factor, of course, is location. Funerals are most expensive in New England, where the average costs are more than $9,100, and the least expensive in around the Rockies and the West Coast. States like Oregon, Washington, here in Idaho, where the average costs are well under $8,000. Generally, areas with higher cost of living will have higher costs for the dead, higher funeral costs. So try to die over here if you're worried about costs, I guess. Unsurprisingly, a service with viewing, ceremony, and burial will cost more than a service that just involves cremation. So-called economy wood caskets made of things like pine, poplar, or veneer construction can cost $1,000 to about $3,000. Oak or cherry caskets can cost $3,000 to $7,000. Some luxury materials like mahogany, walnut, other exotic woods can cost upwards of $20,000, especially when accounting for additions like hand-finished details, custom interiors, specialty designs. I was not able to get an estimate for what an animatronic exoskeleton would cost or a casket designed to push it up and out via a hydraulic mechanism. Turns out you cannot find everything on the internet. Making things much more expensive, caskets often sell for 300% to 500% more than wholesale prices. A $600 casket might cost $3,000 at a funeral home. Thankfully, by U.S. federal law, funeral homes generally must accept a casket purchased elsewhere and cannot charge a handling fee simply because they bought it from another vendor. And then there is the matter of where to put the casket. A burial plot typically costs anywhere from about $500 to $25,000 or more, depending primarily on location. In rural areas, plots can often be found for less than $3,000, while suburban cemeteries commonly charge between $2,000 and $10,000. In major metropolitan areas, especially where land is scarce, prices of $5,000 to $25,000, not unusual at all, and particularly prestigious or historic cemeteries, they can charge far, far more. The most expensive cemeteries in America are in New York and Los Angeles. In the Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park in L.A., the final resting place of Marilyn Monroe, space is severely limited and plots regularly trade on the open market, which is fucking weird to me. There's people out there trading resting places. Premium spaces near celebrities frequently cost between $200,000 and several $1 million. Situated in the heart of Hollywood, the historic graveyard, the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, home to countless stars like Judy Garland and Rudolph Valentino. Prices in the exclusive Garden of Legends area start at $200,000, can exceed $6 million for custom family mausoleums. $6 million for a house for the dead. Finally, the National Historic Landmark of Woodland Cemetery in the Bronx in New York City features elaborate private family mausoleums that have sold for upwards of $4.5 million. Some families have sold their family mausoleums to other families for seven figures. That's a interesting way to make money, but why not, I guess? Oh, shit. Do you know our dead grandparents' final resting place is worth almost $5 million? Do you think they'll care if we sell it? I don't think they will. And if they do, I don't think they can stop us. Let's do it. When buying a burial plot, the plot price is simply for the right to be buried in that space. It usually does not include the cost of digging the grave, closing it up afterwards, or installing a headstone or mausoleum. Then there's the burial vault, the oftentimes optional structure that a casket can go into. A basic concrete grave liner generally costs anywhere from $700 to $1,500, while a standard burial vault will run between $1,000 and $3,000 typically. Higher end sealed, signed, delivered, sealed, reinforced, or metal lined vaults can cost anywhere from $2,000 to $15,000 or more. Many cemeteries require either a vault or a liner because it helps prevent the ground above the grave from sinking as the casket eventually deteriorates. And why do any of this? Wouldn't it be easier to simply leave the bodies of our loved ones out in the woods where they can just decompose peacefully? Return them to the land from which they came? Or set them off in a Viking funeral, burn them on some kind of floating pyre, catapult them towards a floating target for fucking prizes? Maybe. Like with many things, our attitudes towards death, how we engage with the ritual of experiencing the end of another's life, is largely the product of our wider culture. And our attitudes about death, the final rite of passage for every human being, has been one of the primary topics for every culture to address with traditions, belief systems, and practices. For a long time, these practices were directly influenced by what kind of technology was available, which, for most of human history wasn't much. It was typically a hole in the ground, maybe a box, maybe a shovel, and then anything like, food, drink, or gifts that would spring up around the funeral to support mourners. In early America, as most of us know, death was a frequent part of colonial life. The conditions of the 17th century in the U.S. were such that 40% roughly of children in society did not reach adulthood. That's a disturbing number. Early death, parental grief, just a constant back then. I know we got a lot of problems in the current day, but we don't have problems like that, at least not in most of the world. Whew. The most profitable funeral-related material produced by the colonial press back then was mourning broadsides, these pamphlets basically that contain eulogies for the deceased. While Puritan funerals were silent, somber affairs, the night before them was generally a lively communal event. The night before the burial, friends and family of the deceased would gather at the house of mourning to partake in a viewing or time of watching over the body to make sure that the deceased did not awaken. This so-called wake was accompanied by a large feast where mourners celebrated with food and liquor. The rum bill was often the most lavish expense of the entire funeral. Real quick, the term wake does not come from the ritual of making sure that the dead were truly dead, by the way, though. The term originated centuries earlier. The true origin of the word wake comes from ancient Celtic and Old English traditions of staying awake to act as a spiritual guard or a vigil over the body. People believed that the soul remained with the body until burial, and the vigil was held to protect the deceased from evil spirits, guide their soul to the afterlife. Man, even if you lived a good life, you still had to hope that your fucking dipshit friends kept the appropriate vigil so that dark forces didn't get a hold of you, right? Got to keep an eye on that body and fight off the demons with, squirt guns full of holy water or fucking blessed swords or blessed wands or just regular wands. I don't know. Back to America. As the population in the colonies grew, their funeral ceremonies became increasingly elaborate public displays of mourning. The exchanging of gifts became a major part of colonial death rituals, the most common being pairs of gloves and gold rings that were distributed to the attendees. At the funeral of Waitstill Winthrop, grandson of the founding governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, 60 rings were given to friends in attendance. How odd. Odd that this dude was literally named Waitstill, right? First of all, like hold still. Also odd that 60 people got a Waitstill death ring to remember him by. No one's getting a fucking remembrance ring at my funeral. No one. Maybe new car if I hit the target. The total expense of the entire ceremony was over 600 pounds, which amounted to 1/5 of Winthrop's entire estate. What an absurd waste of money. Unsurprisingly, the increasing grandeur of funeral ceremonies became a financial burden for many in the community, particularly for widows and children who became impoverished sometimes by spending so much of their estate money on daddy's funeral bill. Feeling a little bit guilty now about my wish for an animatronic suit and catapult. I'm definitely not going to even consider, not anymore, a catapult and an exoskeleton. Apparently spending that much money would just be selfish. Colonial legislators began to pass sumptuary laws to regulate extravagant funeral purchases. This legislation restricted the amount of money that could be charged for things like mourning garments, the tolling of the church bell, and undertaker services. It also enacted fines for excessive gift giving and providing liquor at funerals. The more I learn about humanity, the weirder I think we collectively are. For example, in 1761, the Massachusetts Bay Province enacted an act to retrench the extraordinary expenses at funerals. That's actually what it was called, which read in part, no scarves, gloves, except 6 pair to the bearers, and 1 pair to each minister of the church or congregation where any deceased person belongs. Wine, rum, or rings shall be allowed and given at any funeral, upon the penalty of £50 to be forfeited by the executor. to the will or estate of the person interred, or to be recovered by action in any of His Majesty's courts of record. Great job, guys. Way to put on those powdered wigs and just get some important shit done. Way to fucking regulate that problem. Problem solved. Not even really sure that there was a problem, but you fucking solved it. Moving along now, the 19th century is considered to be the genesis of the modern American funeral industry. Towns grew into cities, which quickly became severely overcrowded. As local urban cemeteries ran out of burial space, the rural park cemetery emerged. Since these were located far enough away from the city to require transportation, coffin makers began to offer additional services like carriage rentals and hearse transportation to the gravesite. Over time, these coffin makers began to take on other duties of what is now considered death care. They offered mourning wear, burial clothes, flowers, preparation of the body, coordination of the entire funeral service. But for the most part, the act of physically getting the body ready for burial was much the same as it had always been: cleaning and dressing the body in appropriate garments. But with the Civil War, that would change. Soldiers were desperate not to be buried on what they considered enemy soil, and likewise, their families were very eager to have their loved ones' bodies returned to them. But that presented a problem, right, just logistically. Despite remarkable advances in transportation like trains, the journey was still very often quite a long one. From a battlefield in a border state or the upper South to a northern city, transport might take several days to about a week. From much deeper in the Confederacy, could take 1 to several weeks, right? From much deeper in the Union, like vice versa. In addition, rail networks were fragmented, wartime damage often disrupted service. And even before you got to the transportation method, arranging identification, permits, and the proper pathways for the bodies could take days. Sometimes bodies would be preserved for transportation or for viewing by packing them in ice, or laying them on so-called cooling boards with a concave ice-filled box fitted over the torso and head. But what if they didn't have any fucking ice handy, right? That wasn't always an option. Even when it was, didn't always work very well. Shortages of ice, other materials during the Civil War meant that families were likely to get back something that looked less like a body and more like a nasty, noxious bucket of human soup, which is probably my least favorite kind of soup. Not that I've tried it, which I haven't to my knowledge. Luckily, scientific advances would help preserve bodies through a new process called embalming. Now, embalming existed long before the Civil War, long before the 19th century. The most famous embalmers were the ancient Egyptians. And they developed elaborate preservation techniques for mummification over 5,000 years ago, back between 4,000 and 3,500 BCE. But their goal was religious and spiritual preservation rather than viewing before burial. Embalming in its modern form actually goes back to the 1600s. The English physiologist William Harvey developed some of the earliest techniques while studying how blood moves through the body. As part of his experiments, he injected colored liquids into the arteries of cadavers. Later, scientists such as Frederick Reusch and Gabriel Clotaris used similar methods to slow decomposition. Reusch was an interesting dude. Among a lot of other things he did, he used preserved anatomical specimens, preserved by either drying or embalming them, to create these macabre dioramas, some scenes incorporating human parts. Just fun stuff like infant skeletons, adorned with lace and jewelry and arranged in artistic displays. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily mind some of that, but it would freak some people out for sure. Can you imagine walking into somebody's living room, seeing something like, oh my, is that what I think it is? Well, do you think it's 3 baby skeletons wearing diamond necklaces, playing Ring Around the Rosie, wearing crowns made of squirrel spines? If so, then yes, it is! Do you love it? The first person to fully describe embalming as a way to preserve bodies for burial was a Scottish anatomist, William Hunter. Billy's work became especially famous after his younger brother, John Hunter, embalmed a woman named Mrs. Martin Van Butchell, in 1775. Her will had stated that her husband could keep control of her fortune if and only if her body remained above ground. To satisfy that condition, he had her embalmed, dressed in fashionable clothes, and displayed in a glass-topped case in his sitting room, where visitors could and did come and view her during visiting hours. What a fun thing to look at when you get up in the middle of the night to grab a fresh glass of water, for example. Oh, fuck! God damn it, why are you still there? I hate this. Still, pre-19th century, the average American was pretty opposed to embalming the body. Most people considered it to be a mutilation. But with the Civil War, that perception would change. Dr. Thomas Holmes, considered the father of modern embalming, would start using a new embalming process on fallen Union soldiers, embalming over 4,000 bodies before he privatized his practice. He had come up with this new process as a result of his experience in college, where he had fucked a whole bunch of corpses and did not like how it made his dick feel. Wait, what? No. Back in college, he had complained that preservation was either improperly rendered, ineffectual, or not attempted at all. The preservatives used at the time, including mercury and zinc-based compounds, were bad for medical students' health, who had to spend a lot of time inhaling all that stuff. Not the best for them. Also, by this time, medical students, or schools rather, were facing the problem that was about to hit the U.S. during the Civil War. Students needed cadavers to learn anatomy and practice their skills on, but the bodies were decomposing too quickly before they could practice on them. That led to a lot of grave robbing and body selling on the black market. The proposed solution to this problem was to pump the bodies full of a bunch of really toxic chemicals. But Holmes thought there might be a better way. Over the course of his studies, he learned about how in 1838 a French chemist named Jean-Nicolas Ganal had introduced a new method for preserving human remains in which arsenic was injected directly into the carotid artery. This allowed anatomists to dissect corpses or prepare anatomical specimens without worrying about the putrefaction or decay. By and large, the method worked, though many anatomists suffered arsenic poisoning as a result, so it wasn't quite the non-toxic approach Holmes had desired. But it did deliver astonishingly lifelike results, which would end up unsurprisingly being exactly what a lot of people wanted. Right before the Civil War, Holmes experimented with arterial embalming, and through this developed an arsenic-based solution that could be pumped into a cadaver's arteries via an injection apparatus. And how does arsenic do what it does? Well, it preserves bodies by blocking the biological processes required for decomposition, effectively acting as an extreme sterilizing agent. When a person or an animal dies, the body naturally breaks down through self-digestion, autolysis, and bacterial putrefaction. Arsenic disrupts these pathways at a molecular level, largely preventing the tissue, or more accurately, really slowing down the tissue from rotting. So then, as a captain in the Union Army Medical Corps, stationed in Washington, D.C., Holmes got his chance to show off his new technique after the death of Colonel Elmer Ellsworth. Colonel Elmer E. Ellsworth. Why Elmer's mom and dad? Why would you do that to baby boy? Anyway, a friend of President Abraham Lincoln, Ellsworth was also the first officer to be a military casualty of the Civil War. On May 24th, 1861, he was shot while removing a Confederate flag from the roof of a hotel in Virginia. Thanks to Holmes, Ellsworth's body was embalmed and displayed to the public at his funeral, and people were reportedly very impressed with his lifelike look. Afterwards, Ellsworth's body was taken to New York City, where thousands lined up to view the funeral procession. Mourners on the route displayed a banner declaring, "Ellsworth, his blood cries for vengeance." And now this new but really old science of embalming takes off. Over the course of the war, Holmes alone embalmed 4,000 men at $100 per corpse. A lot of dead bodies. How weird were his dreams after seeing all that shit? In shops in D.C., Georgetown, and Alexandria, he displayed the preserved bodies of unknown soldiers, which he'd collected from battlefields. The fuck? Man, we used to be so much more morbid than we are now. Imagine seeing a dolled up, propped up, fresh battlefield corpse in the window of some little boutique shop downtown. Thanks to the number of dead bodies piled up, it soon became a quick way for other people to make some money. Embalmers literally followed the Union and Confederate armies across the country, not ominous at all, pitching tents next to battle sites, even offering soldiers the chance to prepay for their own embalming. Wow. In January of 1865, General Ulysses S. Grant withdrew embalmers' permits and ordered them to stay beyond the lines. It was affecting morale. Yeah, no shit. By this point, some embalmers were already moving on to another business model. Many of them started woodworking too, which allowed them to make coffins, and now the modern American funeral industry was up and running. Ironically, before his death in 1900, Thomas Holmes stipulated that his own body should not be embalmed. And why was that? Well, perhaps he knew that embalming, it presented a problem. Not a physical problem, but an emotional one. After all, part of the body's natural decaying is what allows us to move on. When we see a fresh corpse, especially one that looks like the person is only sleeping, it is harder to understand, especially in the throes of grief, that the person's soul or essence or whatever you want to call it has already moved on. It looks like they should be able to just open their eyes and start talking to you again. that they're not really dead. And this was exactly what had happened to President Lincoln. On February 20th, 1862, Abraham's 11-year-old son, Willie, lay dying of typhoid fever in the guest bedroom of the White House. At 5 p.m. that evening, the young boy took his last breath. As Lincoln locked himself in his office, overcome with grief, preparations were made for Willie's body, and Henry P. Cattell, who later would handle Lincoln's own body after he'd been assassinated, was hired to embalm the little boy. Once Cattell's work was done, Willie's body was laid out in the green room of the White House. The poet Nathaniel Parker Willis later described the dead boy's appearance at the funeral with the following: "He lay with eyes closed, his brown hair parted as we had known it, pale in the slumber of death, but otherwise unchanged, for he was dressed as if for the evening, and held in one of his hands, crossed upon his breast, a bunch of exquisite flowers." According to those in attendance, the family intended to send Willie home to the west so that he may sleep under the sod of his own valley after the funeral. At the last minute, however, Lincoln decided that he could not bear to be separated from his dear son's body, and he had the boy's remains interred in William Thomas Carroll's family vault in D.C. The president then visited the grave many, many times and requested that his coffin be reopened on at least 2 occasions so he could look upon his boy and perhaps caress his cold but still somewhat lifelike face. Some stories about this state that Lincoln could not stand to leave the boy alone in the dark, cold tomb. And we do know that he would sit with Willie's body for hours on end, and that Lincoln once admitted to a Union soldier, "Since Willie's death, I catch myself every day involuntarily talking with him as if he were with me." Now, to be fair, there is little solid evidence that embalming itself causes prolonged or unhealthy grief, but anecdotally, there is quite a bit, which only makes sense in my opinion. Looking at a skeleton, you know that person is long dead, no matter how powerful your grief. They've been dead. But looking at a dearly missed loved one who still appears to be alive, just sleeping, it's like refusing to bandage the wound their parting has left you with, and you just keep bleeding and bleeding profusely. But there are, of course, other perspectives on all this. In his influential essay in 1965 book, Death, Grief, and Mourning, English anthropologist Geoffrey Gorer argued that Western societies had made death increasingly private, hidden, and even taboo. He compared death in the 20th century to sex in the 19th century, something that everyone was experiencing or would experience, but that people avoided discussing openly, which made it harder to deal with when inevitably it came up. Similarly, in her 1963 investigation of modern-day burial practices Behind the Formaldehyde Curtain, that's a great title, English-American author and activist Jessica Mitford came to the same conclusion, that the funeral industry and embalming in particular turned a normal human process into something commercialized and fake. As she famously opened her essay, "The drama begins to unfold with the arrival of the corpse at the mortuary. Alas, poor York, how surprised he would be to see how his counterpart of today is whisked off to a funeral parlor and is in short order sprayed, sliced, pierced, pickled, trussed, trimmed, creamed, waxed, painted, rouged, and neatly dressed, transformed from a common corpse into a beautiful memory picture. No law requires embalming, no religious doctrine commends it, nor is it dictated by considerations of health, sanitation, or even of personal daintiness. In no part of the world, but in Northern America, is it widely used." At one point, she describes the vast array of products that embalmers use to preserve and even to improve corpses. She wrote, "There are various choices of embalming fluids. If Flextone is used, it will produce a mild, flexible rigidity. The skin retains a velvety softness. The tissues are rubbery and pliable, ideal for women and children. It may be blended with B&G products, the company's Life-Lick tint, which is guaranteed to reproduce nature's own skin texture, the velvety appearance of living tissue. Suntone comes in 3 separate tints: suntan, special cosmetic tint, a pink shade, especially indicated for young female subjects, and regular cosmetic tint, moderately pink." And all of that is, in my opinion, pretty damn creepy when you really think about it. By this time, mortuary science dictated that between 3 and 6 gallons of dyed and perfumed formaldehyde, glycerin, borax, phenol, alcohol, and water be circulated through a corpse, along with massage cream to plump any areas of flesh that might have been emaciated or sunken. In other words, to erase any sign of illness, disease, etc. To erase any and all signs of death itself. And on one level, That's not entirely a bad thing. Like we said at the beginning, many of us may prefer to remember our loved ones as healthy and vibrant, not as ravaged by illness and see them one last time. Today, too, most funeral homes position themselves at places that help bring people closer to death, not further away from it. But for somebody deep in grief, for somebody who may have already had shaky mental health to begin with and, say, a persistent and powerful delusion about a dead woman who he was meant to find, could this new science of embalming have inadvertently contributed to some very fucking weird behavior? Yes. And today's story is a shining example of that, potentially. It's hard to know what exactly made Carl Tanzler do what he ended up doing. I'm sure it was a mixture of things. But was one powerful ingredient in that mixture the relatively new science of embalming? I think so. Was another the specific cultural climate around the idea of eternal romance, and specifically eternal romance as it was connected to tuberculosis, which was widely considered one of the most aesthetically pleasing diseases? Yeah, I think so. And was another ingredient, probably the most powerful one, something going on in Tanzler's brain, something that none of us will ever be able to fully explain? Perhaps. Let's jump into our timeline and look into all of this now.
Strap on those boots, soldier. We're marching down a Timesuck timeline.
January 12th, 1877. That is where today's story begins, potentially. Since a lot of our information about Carl Tanzler's life is from his own memoirs, and since he loved to lie about himself, we don't actually know that with certainty. As he tells it, however, he was born January 12th, 1877 in Dresden, Germany, in the townhouse that his family called the Castle. But he would grow up in their other house, what his family called Via Kassel, out in the country. And that house was potentially haunted. Carl's mother apparently told him that I guess probably villa is in this situation. Villa was haunted by an active spirit called the White Woman, supposedly one of Carl's ancestors who had died over a century earlier in 1765. Later, Carl would wonder if his own fondness for dead women started here. Interesting. Did young Carl have a hankering for ghost titties? It's possible. It's certainly possible. And don't you dare kink shame him. If he and his ghost ladies want to go all succubus and get their spectral fuck on, don't try and stop him. Maybe you can ask if you can watch, though, right? If you're one of those ghost cucks I've been hearing so much about. I haven't been hearing anything about ghost cucks, but I wish I had been. Sounds fun. Fucking weird. Refocusing now. When Carl was 12, he apparently had a dream, or rather a vision, of a very beautiful girl in a white dress, reclining on a rococo settee, which I painted on a piece of paper then. So that's what he wrote. Young Carl also had other interests outside of a crush on a ghost. He loved electricity, chemical experiments, astronomy, dreamed of inventing a flying machine. I love that back then that's still how you thought of these, what airplanes would be called, flying machines. In high school, he supposedly would build a glider plane and tested himself from a hill in a nearby park. By the time he was in college, he wrote that he had an entire room in the villa devoted to his experiments with high voltage electricity, and that he built a workshop where he had made a boat and 2 hot air balloons. Okay, so he's Frankenstein. He's the type of Frankenstein working in his laboratory. 1901, at the age of 24, he earned a Master of Arts in Medicine, Philosophy, Mathematics, Chemistry, and more for a total of 9 different degrees from the University of Leipzig. Or so he said. Do I think that's true? Oh, fuck no. Nuh-uh. I don't think the fucking balloon shit is true. I don't think the plane shit is true. I don't think almost any of this is true. Around this time, he'd also claim he had another paranormal experience, though. 2, actually. He wrote, I was sitting in my chair in the green room, which was his laboratory. The hour was late, about 11, I would say. I felt tired, but my day's work was not yet finished. Suddenly, without looking up from my papers, I noticed a movement near my side. It was a pencil lying on the table. It moved slowly half across the table, then it lifted itself off of the table, performing a few somersaults in the air and down to the floor. Now a matchbox started walking about the table, lifting itself, gyrating in the air. Then there followed my books. Finally, the entire heavy oaken table lifted itself off the floor and floated upward, as if carried by water. Then there was a noise, like the report of a gun, from the direction of my static electricity machine. You didn't have a fucking static electricity machine. Walking over to see what had happened, I found that all 4 huge central glass discs had been broken right through the middle. Then he said, as the furniture began to shake and move all around the room, it crashed into hundreds of dollars worth of scientific equipment, and Carl didn't know what to make of it. Was it a prank? A thief? A prowler? Something weirder going on, all made up. 2 nights later, he wrote that he woke up at 2 a.m. to find 2 women standing over his bedside. Fuck yeah, bro. Menage a trois. And with ghosts. No worries about STIs or pregnancies. Ideal scenario. Get after it. And if people watch, let some ghost cucks watch. Apparently, they didn't try and fucking know. The first was a tall lady with snow white hair. She seemed to Tanzler to be the white lady he had been told about as a child. The second figure hid behind the white lady who clutched her hand. I thought she was going to clutch her pearls there, but hand. Then the white lady bent down and spoke and said, "I've been trying to get your attention for quite some time, my boy. But you wouldn't take note. You were too much engrossed in your experiments. That's why I had to use some violence. Look here, Carl. I have brought you the bride whom someday you will meet." Carl couldn't respond. I bet little Carl could, though. I bet little Carl was fucking hard as a rock, but regular Carl, I guess he was dumbstruck. He said he was frozen as the white lady drew the second figure closer. The second woman's veil slipped, and for just a moment he saw this woman's long dark hair and beautiful face. The girl smiled, but then vanished. And then Carl came. Maybe, possibly, probably. Thanks to that, Carl became obsessed with the supernatural. He had no rational explanation for what he'd experienced. Nothing that had been written about ghosts or apparitions satisfied his curiosity, so he had to investigate himself. His investigation led him to Camposanto, an expansive open-air monumental cemetery in Genoa, Italy. There he wrote that he had another strange paranormal experience. This time he claimed he saw a marble statue of a beautiful girl who bore a striking resemblance to the apparition introduced to him in the green room in his laboratory. He learned that the girl immortalized in stone had died at the age of 22, and that, interestingly, her name was Elena. As if under a spell, he claimed he kept repeating her name, Elena, Elena. And then all of a sudden, the figure of the apparition of a girl seemed to detach itself from the statue and slowly walk past him. Had he summoned his bride to be? Perhaps. Or he made all that shit up years later in this reverse engineering attempt to fucking somehow rationalize his supposed fated love for a corpse. Either way, Carl still had to get on with his life. Thanks to an expertise in X-ray imaging he had apparently picked up across the supposedly very diverse course of his studies, the now 24-year-old Tanzler got a job with the Australian government and headed to Sydney, where he arrived in 1901. He had made enough money to buy a house overlooking Darling Harbour, a 110-foot powerboat, and even a torpedo boat that he intended to use for deep-sea exploration, of course. But did he? This all seems like a lot. It's unclear again how true all this is. According to Tanzler, the age of 24 would have been a busy year for him, passing 9 different examinations for 9 different degrees, hunting down ghosts, and moving to Sydney, to what's now a very, bougie little area. Very expensive. Some of it may have been true, though. He did speak and write in English quite well, which seems to indicate that he probably lived for a while in an English-speaking country. Later, people would remark that he had a German accent that was slightly British inflected, but it's still unclear how he wound up in Sydney or if he really worked a good, respectable job while he was there. Indeed, co-workers in Florida would later say that Tanzler only mentioned Australia in connection with a time he was incarcerated there, that he would remember that he'd been placed in or talk about being placed in an internment camp for Germans in 1914 during the first year of World War I, after he'd supposedly been there for 13 years already. According to Tanzler, life in Australia was mostly about X-rays and apparitions, though. He would describe another paranormal encounter that supposedly took place one night at exactly 7 p.m., writing, "Still frozen to the threshold, she stretched out both her hands to me, in friendly gesture like a child. As I walked across the room to meet those arms, I felt my hair raising and cold shivers running down my spine. The closer I approached her, and then felt her arms closing around me and felt my arms embracing her. I cannot possibly describe the upsurge of a divine happiness, such as I had never experienced before. There was a melting together in divine bliss. Her wonderful dark tresses, fragrant and caressing, covered us both. There were no longer any chills, only warmth, filling my entire body. It was as if my feet were off the ground and she and I were floating in space." Did he just describe sex with a ghost? Phantom fucking? Wraith coitus? Seems like he did. Melting together in divine bliss? He definitely did. Now he's not only encountering spirits, he is fucking them. And we're all listening to it. We're all hearing about it. We're all ghost cucks. He wrote that he wanted to stay in the ghostly woman's embrace forever, but that as he held her tighter, she disappeared into mist. Luckily, she would be back. She wanted more of that hot Carl action. Apparently, soon after the apparition returned, stayed with him for 7 days, while Tanzler went to work and did errands. She never spoke during this 7-day period, but stood by his bed while he slept at night. No more melting together in divine bliss. Did that specter just friend zone him? After this visit, once again, she vanished into thin air. All of this, especially the paranormal experiences, made Australia something of a paradise for Tanzler. But on the eve of World War I, all of that changed. Tanzler was still German, and now Germans were the enemy. The Australian government supposedly interned him at the Trial Bay concentration camp for 5 years. This does seem to be backed up, at least partially, by some others who were there and wrote of their experiences. When he finally returned to his house on the shore, he claimed it was basically destroyed, that he'd lost his library, all his documents, his laboratory, a collection of diamonds, emeralds, and opals. Oh, no, not the opals. One can never have enough opals. Australia does produce around 95% of the world's precious opals. So I guess, if you were going to stockpile them, that would be the place to do it. Tanzler claimed to arrive back in Germany in 1920. And between then and 1926, we don't know much about what he was up to. Probably, working in another laboratory. He never wrote about his marriage to a young woman named Doris or the birth of their 2 daughters. Not as noteworthy as an opal collection. His story picks back up in 1926 when he decided to start a new life. On February 6th, 49-year-old Karl Tanzler left Germany to be born anew, leaving his young wife. Well, she wasn't that much younger than him, but leaving his wife, Doris, and small daughters behind. He planned to join his sister in Zephyr Hills, Florida. His family would follow once he had settled and felt he could provide for them. Karl's ship departed from Rotterdam in the Netherlands, bound for Cuba initially. But once in Cuba, instead of heading on to Key West, Karl decided to stay for a few days. Why? Because of the sweet, sweet Latin ladies. As he would write in his memoirs, it was the time of the carnival, and all of Havana seemed to be intoxicated with the carnival spirit. As it was, I stayed 4 days, not to amuse myself, but held to the spot by some strange irrational hope that I could find my lost bride in this carnival crowd. This was probably because there were so many beautiful ladies of the Spanish type, who somehow resembled her. And because in this carnival time, so many of them wore veils and fairy-like dresses, which made the similarly still more possible. He was fucking excited. He's like, God damn it, they're so hot. These women reminded him of his lost bride, the ghostly woman that he was apparently still obsessed with, even though he had already married a real living woman, and they already had 2 real living children with each other, and he was planning on bringing them all across the Atlantic to join him shortly. Anyway, while Karl liked Cuba, his first impression of Key West, not as favorable. Perhaps there weren't as many sexy ladies there. Perhaps there weren't any ghostly women there trying to seduce him. Or maybe it's because the terrain was, as he thought, less beautiful than the mountains of Cuba. Interestingly, most of the buildings that Karl saw there are still standing today. Houses built by shipwrights around the turn of the 19th century from sturdy pine and held together with hand-shaped wooden pegs rather than bolts or nails. Some of them were 1 story, some consisting of 2 levels. Many had these things called widow walks or widow's walks on their roofs to enable their owners to look out at the harbor. Other houses were essentially small shacks, which had been built by the owners of local cigar companies for employee housing. Altogether, these houses were spread across about 4 square miles, and as Tanzler got off the ferry, he took it all in. There was nobody to greet him because his telegram had not made it to relatives. The next morning, 12 miles from Key West, carrying the few possessions he had brought with him, Karl climbed aboard the Overseas Railroad and took a train to Miami. From there, he traveled further north to the small town of Zephyr Hills, close to Tampa and St. Petersburg. Once there, he sent a congratulatory water cooler he had painted to his wife waiting in Dresden. I'm sure that was exactly what she wanted, a painted water cooler. Oh, thank you, Karl. That's the perfect gift. Handwritten on the back in German was Happy Birthday, 7 September 1926. It's a different world in Florida. The next year, 1927, when Karl was now 50, his family would join him. Unlike the imaginative, mystical Karl, Doris Tanzler, who was now 38, stocky, healthy, determined, practical, strong-willed, she insisted once she was in America that her daughters only speak English and learn the ways of the people in their adopted country, and basically forget their German traditions. For a while, Karl seemed to do right by his wife. He Americanized his first name by spelling it Karl with a C instead of Karl with a K. Ooh, what a change. Also bought some land, laid the foundation for a home they hoped to move into. To do that required more money, though, which he didn't have. So he took a job at what was supposed to be a one-time stopover point, right, back in Key West. In Karl's own words, the Marine Hospital at Key West employed me as a pathologist and X-ray specialist. I built up a fairly well-equipped X-ray department and peace of mind and scientific work until the fateful day of April 22nd, 1930. Now, that makes it sound like Carl was fairly prosperous, but a woman who worked at the hospital would describe him as destitute. According to her, he started out as an attendant who only cleaned up after procedures, just a type of custodial position. Dude loved to talk himself up and stretch the truth out, or just outright lie. Still, he must have been pretty good at his job, or at least a smooth talker, because eventually he would end up heading the X-ray department. Thanks to the recommendation of Commander Lombard, the physician in charge, who had been transferred there from a stint in New Orleans, where he had battled with the bubonic plague. Seems like this hospital was an interesting workplace. 2 articles about the hospital appeared that year in the Key West Citizen. The first one was a response to accusations made in the Miami News that described the Marine Hospital as nothing other than a saloon and a brothel. Charges that were angrily denied by the drunks and sex workers there. By doctors and staff. The other article seemed to point to a more ordinary workplace, stated that patients at Marine Hospital will have Christmas second to none in whole Island City. The final sentence in the article was, technician Carl Tanzler cooperated by helping with the decorations. That's a weird usage of cooperated, isn't it? Why don't they just say, he helped. He helped fucking with the decorations. Carl Tanzler initially tried to attack the tree decorators, but a deal was struck with him, and he agreed to cooperate with the other decorators and help them as long as they promised to give him his fair share of gingerbread. If the hospital was a bordello or a saloon, it actually wouldn't have been that out of place for Key West. While the town wasn't exactly lawless, it was difficult to get, anywhere else in Florida from this town, and vice versa. And that isolation meant that people were pretty free to do the kind of work they wanted, live the way they wanted, which included doing things like smuggling. Cuban rum was an especially popular form of contraband brought in by any number of sea captains and sailors, many of them who had fled to the Keys to lay low and make a little money off the area's numerous shipwrecks. Indeed, as soon as the ship crashed into the nearby rocks, which happened about once a week back then at the height of this, someone would shout, "Wreck ashore," and then people would run out of their houses, hop into boats, and claim whatever they could from the disaster. Or just run along the beach and just grab shit. In the first half of the 20th century, there was an attempt to make Key West a more upstanding place. President Roosevelt's New Deal brought the WPA, or Work Projects Administration, which offered jobs that paid decently. Even so, most of the town was unemployed, aside from the people who worked regularly at the cigar factories. Men and women who filed into large brick buildings where they would sit in straight-back chairs and hand-roll tobacco leaves, while on an elevated platform, other workers would literally read stories to them to keep the rollers from getting too bored. An early form of podcasting, basically. But if you couldn't make a living with a conventional job in Key West, that wasn't exactly a catastrophe. It drew a lot of eccentric types of people. Florida heat being what it was, a lot of people could and did just crash out on the beach. The sea offered plentiful lobster, conch, yellowtail, fruits and vegetables like mangoes, grew naturally, limes, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, and more. Nobody really had to worry about, affording a grocery bill or having proper shelter. If you happened to get a good catch, or if you pulled some valuable cargo out of a wreck, you could always trade it for what you needed, or like a simple luxury like a cigar. But for Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos, her father's job as a cigar manufacturer brought, if not prosperity, stability. Who was she? Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos, later Maria Elena Milagro de Mesa, was named according to Cuban tradition. Maria, her first name; Elena, her middle name; Hoyos, the surname she took from her father; Milagro, that came from her mother; Mesa would come from her husband. Which of course she took when she got married. But at first she was just Elena, middle child in a lineup of 3 daughters. Despite growing up in a place that to many was an island paradise where people bartered and traded for essentials, Elena's childhood fairly conventional. Her family had been upper middle class back in Cuba, but then they fell on hard times. In search of work, her father uprooted the family, brought them to Key West, where he found a job at a cigar factory. And in phases, the rest of the extended family would come to join them. When Elena was growing up, her house was full of relatives and their friends, uncles, cousins, aunts, cooking in the kitchen. Oh, I bet making the most delicious shit. Boyfriends and girlfriends sneaking off together, children giggling, chasing each other across the lawn. Just everybody generally having a good time. Elena and her 2 sisters, Florinda, or Nana, as she was called, and Celia, they would also spend every Saturday morning at the Strand Movie Theater's matinee show. Every Saturday morning they could, I guess, afford to get away, where they would swoon at Rudolph Valentino or laugh at Charlie Chaplin. The sisters' main pastime would become dancing, though. All 3 girls became very good at it. As they grew up, they grew into becoming some of the most beautiful women in the area by many accounts, especially Elena. Became very popular dance partners at the Cuban club, where they would dance the rumba, the samba, the cha-cha, a two-step called Tony's Wife, and of course the conga line. Because their family couldn't afford fancy dancing clothes or makeup, the girls made mascara from Vaseline and charcoal. They rubbed damp and red crepe paper on their cheeks for blush. Sometimes on special occasions, their parents would buy them cotton dresses for 50 cents a piece. Leather sandals were a special once-in-a-very-blue-moon treat. And then at 18 years old, on February 18th, 1926, the same month that Carl Tanzler set out for America, Elena got married. Her husband was Luis Meza. Their courtship, the wedding, the honeymoon period afterwards, among the best times of Elena's life. The newlyweds were apparently crazy about each other, as newlyweds often are, which predictably led to Elena quickly getting pregnant. But then just a few months later, November 5th, 1926, she had a miscarriage and was devastated. As she grew paler and more withdrawn, her family thought it was because of the loss she had suffered. Indeed, studies have shown that roughly 30% of women experience depression and anxiety immediately following the loss of a pregnancy. But soon it became clear that something else was going on with Elena. Her health was deteriorating. She had a recurring cough, weakness, shortness of breath, chest pain. Finally, the family doctor would confirm the grim diagnosis of tuberculosis. And since it has been a minute since we've discussed it in the Suckverse, what is tuberculosis? In a word, bad. In more than a word, tuberculosis, often abbreviated to TB, is a contagious and infectious disease that is caused by the bacteria Mycobacterium tuberculosis, or MT. And it's, as I mentioned up top, the deadliest disease in human history. Even with all of the medical advances we have today, over 1 million people still died of tuberculosis in 2023. That year, in fact, more people died of TB than died of malaria, typhoid, and war combined. One estimate from Frank Ryan's Tuberculosis, The Greatest Story Never Told, maintains that TB has killed around 1 in 7 people who have ever lived, as I mentioned earlier. COVID-19 displaced tuberculosis as the world's deadliest infectious disease from 2020 through 2022, but then in 2023, TB regained the status it had held for most of what we know of human history, killing approximately 1,250,000 people that year. That's crazy, right? Today, we understand that tuberculosis is an infection caused by bacteria, MT, which has been around for over 70,000 years, with some thinking that this family of bacteria originated more than 150 million years ago. TB is airborne. It spreads from person to person through small particles contained in coughs, sneezes, or exhalations. Anyone can get tuberculosis. In fact, between 1/4 and 1/3 of all living humans have been infected with it at some point. In most people, the infection will lie dormant for a lifetime. But up to 10% of all infected people will eventually become sick, a phenomenon we call active TB. Today, active TB, very curable thanks to antibiotics. Not so much during Elena's lifetime, not at all. Now back to the MT bacteria that causes it. Perhaps unsurprisingly, MT has a long history. 3 million years ago, an early progenitor of MT might have infected early hominids in East Africa. And then somewhere between 20,000 and 15,000 years ago, for the first time, the common ancestor of modern strains of MT might have appeared and then spread across the globe. Indeed, mummies in ancient Egypt from around 5,000 years ago show the telltale deformities that accompany tuberculosis of the bone, wherein the bacteria scrapes out tiny holes in the skeleton, leaving bones that resemble dead coral. Simultaneously, TB was one of the few infectious diseases present in both the Americas and Afro-Eurasia before 1492. Archaeological evidence indicates that TB was in the Americas at least 2,000 years ago, and it has been present in China for at least 5,000 years. In ancient China, TB was known by a term that translates to lung exhaustion. In ancient Hebrew, TB was called by a word that meant wasting away. The famous Greek doctor Hippocrates wrote about TB too, which, as we have learned, was known in Greek by a word, thysis, that meant to decay. Right? Pretty dark association. Around 460 BCE, Hippocrates identified thysis as the most widespread disease of the time and noted it was almost always fatal. Due to common thysis-related fatalities, he warned his colleagues against visiting TB patients in the late stages of the disease because their inevitable deaths might damage the reputations of these attending physicians. He didn't know that those physicians also were at risk of catching TB. By 200 CE, a new Chinese term for consumption had emerged, hui fu, meaning destroyed palace. A Chinese medical textbook at the time read, "Toxic drugs bring no cure. Short needles cannot seize the disease." Within a millennia, Taoist priests would begin referring to the illness as shoujai, or corpse disease. because the illness transformed a living being into a cadaver. Man. And there was something else unique about this disease, other than the fact that it, made you look like a corpse. Unlike many other diseases, for most of human history, consumption appeared indiscriminate, killing the rich and the poor, educated and non-educated at the same rate. Charles Dickens called consumption the disease that wealth never warded off. And indeed, among its victims was one of the richest individuals of the 19th century, American railroad magnate Jay Gould. Also very hard to predict how TB would spread, because TB infects and kills so slowly, it doesn't resemble a plague that sweeps through a community, right, where one family member gets sick and everybody else, or nearly everybody else in the household, is also sick within a few days. This is because MT grows super slowly. The bacteria takes a long time to build up its unusually fatty, thick cell wall, which is a formidable enemy to the immune system. White blood cells then struggle to penetrate the cell wall and kill the bacteria from within. In fact, it's so hard for infection-fighting cells to penetrate the bacteria's cell wall that instead white blood cells usually surround it, creating a ball of calcifying tissue known as a tubercle. MT can survive within these tubercles, replicating very slowly, consuming dead tissue as food. This type of infection, sometimes known as latent tuberculosis, will often last a lifetime without ever making a person sick. And most people infected with TB will never become ill because the tubercles will continue to hold the bacteria within them, preventing active disease from developing, right? Fascinating. But in 5 to 10% of infections, the immune system cannot produce enough white blood cells to surround all the bacteria with tubercles, and MT is able to grow and grow within the lungs or elsewhere, as in brain swelling, tuberculosis, meningitis, to the rupture of infected lymph nodes through the skin, scrofula, to tuberculosis of the bone, which can cause lifelong disability through destroying hip, spine, or limb bones, right? Just brutal shit. TB affecting the spine, known as Pott's disease, is a common and terribly painful cause of a hunched back. Indeed, the fictional hunchback of Notre Dame suffered from Pott's disease. Precisely because consumption was so fundamentally different from other infections, classical understandings of the disease varied wildly. In ancient China, Hui Fu, generally understood to be contagious, but lifestyle factors could worsen it. One book claimed you could get consumption by overworking one's mind and exhausting one's energy, injuring one's chi, and loosening one's sperm. Gotta fucking keep that sperm tight! You don't want fucking loose jizz? My God. You fucking trying to get consumption? In ancient Greece, Hippocrates thought it to be an inherited condition, writing that consumptives beget consumptives. Other Greeks, including the physician Galen, believed the disease to be contagious. In ancient India, consumption understood to be caused by excessive fatigue, anxiety, and hunger. In other communities, it was seen to be the result of a curse or a poison, or, naturally, demonic possession. But other advanced thinkers thought that the disease was being caused by something not demonic or related to a curse, perhaps something of this earth, yet invisible to the human eye. Around 1,000 years ago, the Persian scholar and poet Ibn Sina wrote that tuberculosis and other illnesses were caused when the body was contaminated by tainted foreign organisms that are not visible by naked eye. Smart fucking dude. He wrote that shit in the early 11th century, almost exactly 1,000 years ago. And he fucking knew more about illnesses than a lot of people do today. But this view would take a couple centuries to migrate over into Europe. More than a couple, actually. In his Opera Medica of 1679, Dutch physician and scientist Franciscus Sylvius was the first European to identify actual tubercles as a consistent and characteristic change in the lungs and other areas of consumptive patients, and how this would progress to abscesses and cavities. But what were those tubercles? In 1720, the English physician Benjamin Martin would write that TB could be caused by wonderfully minute living creatures, which once they had gained a foothold in the body, could generate the lesions and symptoms of the disease. And he wrote more about how this could happen. It may be therefore very likely that by a habitual lying in the same bed with the consumptive patient, constantly eating and drinking with him, or by very frequently conversing so nearly as to draw in part of the breath he admits from the lungs, a consumption may be caught by the sound person. I imagine that slightly conversing with consumptive patients is seldom or never sufficient to catch the disease. Right? Another smart dude. He's pretty much figured it out. So how did doctors go about curing this, though? Right? That's, of course, a lot harder to figure out. Ibn Sina, the first person to think that TB had a microbial cause, praised the use of garlic in TB treatment. And garlic does, in fact, have antimicrobial properties, but not nearly strong enough to treat the disease effectively. In Europe, bloodletting was a common and completely ineffective treatment. You would still have TB, and now a lot less blood that you needed to fight it with. Sometimes you just bleed to death, so thank you, doc. In the Americas, herbal remedies were used, some of which were useful to varying degrees, but not curative. Global medical treatment for TB has ranged from rubbing buzzard fat on the chest, yep, buzzard fat, to ingesting human milk, from animal sacrifice to acupuncture. Regarding breastfeeding, it was actually believed that the most powerful cure was suckling directly from a healthy woman's breast. Prescription? Titties. Find them and suck them until your mouth has been filled with warm, curative milk. Hopefully no doctors were recommending anybody's mother or sisters, but I bet that happened from time to time because of how fucking deranged some of us humans are. Identifying effective treatment was made more difficult by the fact that people sometimes seem to recover only to get sick again, or seem to get sick after treatment only to recover later. Like many of the time, Hermann Bremer, a 19th century Silesian botany student suffering from TB, was instructed by his doctor to seek out a healthier climate. He traveled to the Himalayan mountains where he could pursue his botanical studies while trying to rid himself of the disease, and it actually worked. In the 1850s, he returned home, kind of cured. He presented as totally cured, and he started studying medicine. I said kind of cured because climate can't actually kill the bacteria, but in some cases, rest and climate, healthy living, the right herbal remedies, etc., can take the bacteria, help take it from active to latent, right? Help your body fight it off. Your body's immune cells can wall off the bacteria, as I mentioned earlier, forming that protective barrier, that shell called a tubercle. And inside that tubercle, the bacteria, again, placed in a dormant, non-replicating state. Where they survive, but they're kept completely under control. They're in fucking jail. They're in consumption jail. In 1854, Bremer presented his doctoral dissertation. Tuberculosis is a curable disease. In the same year, he built an institution in Gerbersdorf in the Prussian state of Silesia, where in the midst of fir trees, patients were exposed on their balconies to continuous fresh air. This setup became the blueprint for the subsequent development of the sanatorium that we've heard about in numerous sucks, especially Wild West ones. Places where people's social and sanitary conditions would be improved with warm weather, dry air, a sterile environment, enough that hopefully they could get better, isolated them from healthy populations as well. And then more scientific breakthroughs would follow. In 1865, a French military doctor, Jean-Antoine Villemin, single-handedly demonstrated that consumption could be passed from humans to cattle and from cattle to rabbits. He would postulate that a specific microorganism must be the cause of the disease, finally laying to rest a centuries-old belief that consumption arose spontaneously in each affected organism. Then, as we mentioned in the beginning, in 1882, Robert Koch discovered a staining technique that enabled him to see Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which allowed for the development of later antibiotics. And antibiotics for tuberculosis would not be successfully administered until late 1944, sadly too late for Elena. Throughout all of this, tuberculosis made an astounding impact on culture, religion, economics, etc. For instance, did you know that the cowboy hat, the icon of the American West that has experienced a huge resurgence today thanks to country pop superstars, it was invented because of tuberculosis. In the 1850s, a young man named John was living in New Jersey, working as a hat maker, when he started coughing up blood. John visited the doctor and learned he had consumption. According to the prevailing wisdom of the time, his only real chance of survival was to head west. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, it was commonly accepted that consumption could be effectively treated by dry air, as I mentioned, which, made a kind of sense. Consumptive lungs seemed wet. So did the humid, stagnant air in big American cities like New York and Baltimore, where consumption flourished. People fled to Arizona or New Mexico or California, which came to be known as the land of new lungs. As one brochure boldly promised, come west and live. Several cities, including Pasadena and Colorado Springs, were essentially created for consumptives and their families. But it wasn't only desert air that was mythologized. Doctors also recommended island air or mountain air or forest air, even Italian air. The justification for the so-called travel cure varied, except for one constant: consumption thrived in cities. And so the solution must be rural. Well, John headed out from his home in New Jersey to the rough frontier town of St. Joseph, Missouri. He ended up settling there for a while and miraculously started to feel better. For reasons we still don't fully understand, but due to that process of going from active to latent, between 20 and 25% of people recover from active TB illness without treatment, and John was among this lucky minority. Regaining his health over the next few years, he noticed something about the West. Hat options, not great. Fur traders of European descent often wore bug-infested, brimless coonskin caps. Folks who made their way to Missouri from Texas and Mexico, meanwhile, tended to wear wide-brimmed straw hats to protect it from the sun, but leaked in the rain. So after returning to the Northeast with his consumption under control, John B. Stetson, created a new sort of hat, which in time came to be known as the cowboy hat or the Stetson. Pretty cool little piece of trivia there. And the influence of tuberculosis went way beyond a single type of hat in America, of course. It influenced politics at the national level as well. For example, even after New Mexico became a U.S. territory in 1848, it was regarded with a lot of suspicion by many white Americans. After all, the majority of people living in the territory were indigenous people, or people who spoke Spanish as their first language. They spoke a different language, so they must be bad. Different always equals bad. Never forget that. Always be afraid of different. Never learn, never adapt, always resist.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Hey.
I said, are you fucking kidding me?
Don't you dare mock me, Miles. Anyway, despite New Mexico having the institutions needed for statehood, such as a large enough population and a strong majority of its voters seeking statehood, Congress repeatedly turned down New Mexico's attempts to fully enter the Union. Different, bad. Resist change at all costs. In order to please Congress, New Mexican officials realized they needed to recruit a larger white and English-speaking population, and thus began New Mexico's quest to woo consumptives from the American Northeast and South with the promise of desert air, open skies, and world-class consumption care. The plan worked. By 1910, about 10% of all New Mexicans were tuberculosis patients. And with all these new white patients, residents now, Congress finally acquiesced, and New Mexico became the 47th U.S. state in 1912. Same, good. Different, bad. Love, same. Hate, bad. There was another aspect of TB that we haven't yet talked about, though. One that relates more closely to our story. Before the 19th century, TB was often associated, like so many diseases, with immorality, lack of hygiene, and other undesirable traits that made it seem like it was the victim's fault for getting sick. Why do we humans make assumptions like that? Well, because many of us are ignorant, selfish, lack empathy, live fearfully. If we can just believe that bad things only happen to bad people, right? Hello, just world fallacy. Then we get to believe that as long as we be good, we no get hurt. A simple rule for simple people. In the 1800s, though, this thinking began to change. I mean, a lot of people still employ versions of this today, but thankfully not as many. As it became increasingly clear to many that stigma alone could not answer the why of consumption, people began to conclude that consumption was caused by a personality, one especially attuned to the fragility and fleeting loneliness of life. Okay? Did you see that coming? I did not. I guess this made a kind of sense. In Northern Europe, consumption was widely understood to be an inherited disease passed on like personality traits from parents to kids, and so it reasonably followed that consumption might be accompanied by other traits like beauty and brilliance and sensitivity. Indeed, consumption was believed to bring one's creative powers to new levels, helping artists get in deeper touch with the spirit as their worldly bodies literally shrank away. The fuck? It said that Victor Hugo's friends joked with him that he could have been a truly great novelist if he had just had consumption. And Lord Byron, widely considered one of the greatest English language poets of all time, wrote, "I should like, I think, to die of consumption, because then the women would all say, 'See that poor Byron! How interesting he looks in dying!'" All of the physical signs of consumption seem to point, for many I guess, to this idea of the spirit's beauty. After all, the person got paler, thinner, with rosier cheeks and larger eyes, almost more beautiful. Indeed, women with consumption were almost always believed to become more beautiful, ethereal, wondrously pure. Oh my God. Some women even applied belladonna to their eyelids, albeit in minimally toxic amounts, to dilate their pupils so they would have this wide-eyed consumptive look. And magazines offered instructions for how to apply red paint to the lips and cheeks to capture the rosy glow of the dying, of consumptive fevers. Oh, we're so fucking weird. As English novelist and poet, Jane Eyre author Charlotte Bronte put it in a letter she wrote to her sister, as her sister was dying of the disease, "Consumption, I am aware, is a flattering malady." Okay. This is fucking so weird. Perhaps this perception of increased beauty played a role in Elena's story. Of the various strains of tuberculosis, the most dangerous form, the kind Elena had, was a type called hasty consumption back then, because it very quickly consumed those unfortunate enough to contract it. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, we're back on track now, her doctor immediately referred her to the Naval Marine Hospital for a blood test and an x-ray of her lungs to see if any lesions had formed. During the hospital visit, which took place April 22nd, 1930, Fearing the results, Elena and her husband, Louise, rode the trolley and then walked the remaining block to the hospital for the appointment. Once there, Louise stayed outside in the waiting room while Elena was ushered into an examination room where a certain distinguished-looking gentleman with a beard and mustache, or a very fucking creepy-looking motherfucker in my opinion, prepared to take the blood sample from Elena. This man was, of course, Carl Tanzler. And he would later write that he had an immediate, reaction to her. Boner? Is he talking about boner there? I think he's talking about boner. Let's read what he wrote. He wrote, in the middle of my routine work, I received a call from the head office to go and take a blood test from a young senorita who, as an outpatient, had come for examination. I hardly looked at the patient as I entered the room. I don't buy that. First thing I noticed of her personality as I bent down to take a drop of blood from her, from one of her fingertips, rather than one of her ears, which were too exquisitely lovely to mar, was that her hand was unusually small, its long, tapering fingers the loveliest I had ever seen. Have any of you ever had a moment like that with somebody else's hands? Like with their fingers? Like the first time you saw someone's hand, were you ever like, oh, fuck! Oh, I've never, and I mean never seen a finger that sexy. Oh, God. I have not. I guess I'm not into digit kink, or whatever it might be called. Carl continued, as the needle struck, the hand twitched a little, and it was then that from my kneeling position I raised my head for the first time to say, I'm very sorry to have caused you pain. Forgive me, please. Her face had been hidden by her hand, so that I had hardly seen it as I first entered the room, but now she withdrew her hand to answer me, and I looked into a face of unearthly beauty, the face of the bride, which had been promised to me by my ancestor 40 years before. I was so thunderstruck, I hardly heard her saying, it didn't hurt much. Excuse my nervousness. Her voice was soft and sweet and childlike. It reminded me of a mockingbird's song in spring. Okay, so, are we hearing a hopeless romantic here, or fucking lunatic? Lunatic for me. Ding, 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 lunatic. Elena had no idea that the technician was so attracted to her. She had other things on her mind, like, whether or not she was going to fucking die soon. But Carl Tanzler, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Back in his office, he sat around, feeling that he had finally met the one. So he was shocked when the nurse came in and gave him her file, which had said that she was married. In Carl's words, she belonged to someone else. Still, this didn't really matter to Tanzler. I mean, he was also married, and clearly did not give a shit about that. This was the woman from his visions, the one promised to him, and his promising visions trumped all else. Carl resolved to make the best impression he could when Elena came back the next day for a chest x-ray. On his way to the hospital the next morning, his clothes were ironed to perfection. The sun was shining. He was still beady-eyed and fucking weird-looking, in my opinion. But the lush tropical foliage was glistening, which was nice. When Elena entered for her x-ray, he said, "Good morning, Miss Hoyos." And apparently he then bowed. Kind of weird. She sat on an oak chair, told him that she had slept better the night before and her cough didn't seem as bad. He replied that was good. And he held her hand to take her pulse, trying to hide the flutter of his own pulse as he touched her skin for the second time and maybe came a little. Then he instructed her to unbutton the top button of her blouse. Oh, fuck yeah, bro. So he could hear her heartbeat. Totally, for that reason, sure. She did so, and he pressed his stethoscope to the smooth skin below her collarbone, first on her right side, then the left. And now he definitely came if he hadn't already. Meanwhile, Elena's heart was beating fast. She was nervous, not only because the visit might confirm she had an incurable disease, but because a weird fucking German dude was touching her nervously, looking at her in his creepy way, and the crotch of his pants, maybe freshly wet with cum. Tanzler's heart was, of course, beating quickly as well. He next guided her over to the x-ray machine and instructed her to take a deep breath and hold it while he took the image. Also, he said, she would have to take off her blouse. Oh, and the rest of her undergarments. Of course that creep did. She asked if that was really necessary, and he said it was. Even though it definitely was not, that fucking creep. Then he did agree to turn off the lights as she requested while she undressed. Still, there was a dim red bulb that was part of the equipment so he could see as she undid the remaining buttons and pulled down her slip so her young, perky breasts were fully exposed. Then, sweating profusely, maybe jerking off quietly inside his pants, creepy Tanzler took the x-rays. Afterwards, he reassured her that he would do everything in his power to make sure she got healthy. He would see her the next day, he said, to give her the diagnosis. When she left, he looked at the images, and his excited mood vanished. Elena did have tuberculosis. He would confirm it the next day and somehow manage to wrangle an invitation from Elena's mother to come to the family home to talk about the prognosis further. He went that evening, returned a few days later to take a blood test. Every time he saw her, he fell more deeply in love. And, I imagine, tried to get her naked again. Okay, it is time to draw some blood. Would you mind taking your clothes off? All right, I need to take your temperature. So just go ahead and fully undress if you would. Hey, I need to check your pulse. Please fully undress, slip into this lingerie. Just dance around, sexy-like, for a few minutes. Meanwhile, Elena was suffering. Not long after diagnosis, her beloved husband, Luis, abandoned her for another woman, left Key West for Tampa before making his way to Miami, where he would become a waiter. He would later claim that Elena's illness had nothing to do with his decision to leave, but did it? I mean, it was highly likely, he might have thought it was highly likely, that he would catch it and then die if he stayed. News of the breakup made its way, of course, back to the one person who saw all this as amazing, Carl Tanzler. Soon he offered to send Elena, at his own expense, even though, again, he was supposed to be supporting his wife and 2 kids, which he was not, to a famous tuberculosis institute abroad. But Elena refused. She didn't think her condition was that serious. So Tanzler wrote a couple of, medical equipment manufacturers, see if he could get the right equipment to treat her right there in the Florida Keys. While he waited for that, he used the hospital's equipment to give her free radiation therapy, it sounds. And in his free time, he jerked off so frequently, he whittled his dick down to little more than a toothpick. And then, refusing to follow his own doctor's orders to slow down, he jerked off even more furiously, and he broke it off, and he did use it as a toothpick until he threw it away. And now he could only come by punching himself in the balls. But soon he had punched those poor balls completely flat. So now he could only come by poking a hole in his scrot and blowing up his balls like a balloon, like he would a beach ball with a pump. And then he punched it flat again and again and again until one day he blew too much air into his scrot and he fucking popped it like a balloon. And then he couldn't come anymore, could he? But you knew that. We all did. Because that's how balls work, obviously. That's science. You can't use them anymore once they're fucking popped. Ignore all that. Forgive me. What I meant to say was that in his free time, he started building an airplane. Yeah, sure. In all likelihood, he bought a very small wrecked plane, part of one, hauled it to the lawn behind the hospital where he was allowed to keep it, and he started restoring it. Why? Well, in Tanzler's own crazy words, once Elena had regained her health, this plane was to take the 2 of us to the South Sea Island, which I discovered for myself during one of my fishing expeditions in Australia. This was a little paradise, and my dream was that Elena and I should spend our honeymoon there. Every time she came to the hospital for treatment, we took time out to inspect the plane together. Those moments were of great delight for both of us. When we sat side by side in a little pilot's cabin and imagined how it would be when it carried us into the air and across the ocean. But was Elena actually into this plan, or him, or was she just being polite to the weird fucking man who had promised that he was going to cure her disease and keep her alive? I am strongly assuming that second one. Indeed, that was exactly what Tanzler had promised. Promised Elena, promised her parents. They were, of course, deeply worried about being able to afford Elena's medical treatment. Tanzler told him, don't even worry about it. I got it. Around this time, he did stop sending any and all money back to his fucking family in Zephyr Hills. That creepy piece of shit. We can all truly hate him now, if we didn't already, right? I'm going to say we can. Let's for sure do. Some of that money he spent on her treatments. He had other plans for the money as well, though. On Elena's 21st birthday, he bought a ring and hid it in a bouquet of roses. As they celebrated with cake and wine, he told her he could give her so much more than someone her own age. But alas, Elena turned him down. She reminded him that she was still a married woman, that even if her husband had left her, she had made a commitment in the eyes of God. Clearly, she took marriage a wee bit more seriously than he did. Tanzler tried to sway her, describing how he still intended to get her well, and then fly her to the South Seas. But she laughed. You're going to fly me in your plane with no wings? Oh yeah, did I mention the plane had no wings? It had no wings. More of a cockpit, really, like just a cockpit, maybe with some wheels, than a proper plane. Why did he call it a plane? Well, because he was a delusional psychopath. When he kept pressing her, she then told him plainly, Carl, I think I'm dying. She did not want to spend her last days in some weird romance with a weird doctor, who wasn't even a doctor, he's a fucking technician. She wanted to spend it with her family, but he would refer to himself as a doctor. Still, Elena did not want to be unkind. She thought he had done a lot for her, so she did invite him to her sister's wedding. But when he got there, when he got there, she introduced him to the groom, and then she kept, serving drinks and talking to other guests. And by the end of the night, he was fucking annoyed. So annoyed, he turned to her and said that she was too sick to host parties, She needed to rest, recuperate, and marry him. Let's get married and let's get away from this, he told her. Before Elena could respond, her mother declared that no daughter of hers was ever going to marry an American, right? Or a fucking weird German guy. And that if Elena did get married again, her husband would be Cuban. And that was that. Or should have been. But Tanzler's stalker ass didn't quit. The next time he saw her, he brought her a pearl necklace, probably not the kind of pearl necklace he wanted to give her, and he sent over his radio so she could listen to music. He wrote her letters sprinkled equally with declarations of love and medical advice. Here is one of those. My darling Elena, please don't deceive yourself that all is well. Even if you feel that way, don't throw caution into the wind. Your enemy is an invisible one. He can only be seen by a trained scientific eye, and he can only be fought in a scientific manner. Please, darling, do not listen to irresponsible advice. I know there are quacks around who are suggesting all kinds of magic cures which have their common source in ignorance. Please, take the medicine I am sending and do come back to the hospital for a new checkup. Dr. Lombard, too, he wants to see you. I am working on our airplane in my spare time. It is now nearly completed, and the next time you come, I will give you the key for the cabin, and we shall officially christen it. And then, too, I am already collecting all the things we are going to need on our wedding trip. Silk dresses for you, and a bridal gown which is all white silk, and ale the rest of your trousseau, even lingerie, and silver slippers. And last but not least, all of your medicines, like kinesol and adrenaline, glucose, beef extract, and all the rest of it. Forever yours, Carl. So that's cool. This dude is a real fucking creep. Christian it, lingerie. Dude, she's 21, 22 at this point. He's 53 or 54. She is literally dying. The only reason she ever fucking saw him was medical treatment, right? He was just her radiology technologist giving her free treatment. Soon, Elena was missing appointments, though, at the Marine Hospital and making excuses to no longer go. One excuse was that her father's car wasn't working. So Tanzler sent over a taxi. Then Elena said, well, she didn't trust the taxi company. He still didn't get the hint. So he drove over in his own car to get her. But she hid from him. She wanted nothing to do with him. Of course she didn't. Right? I'm sure he scared the shit out of her. She's dying. Right? She had just lost her baby not that long ago. Her husband had fucking deserted her. She didn't have long left to live. She wanted to spend it with her family and not this weird motherfucker. Elena wrote him a short letter, though, apologizing and saying that she would be happy to see him at her house if he wanted to swing by later. She was too nice. Right? That never works, that approach, with these cannot take a hint delusional motherfuckers. When he did stop by, Tanzler was frustrated by the numerous other people around. All the people preventing him from having Elena to himself. Now, with Elena getting sicker and sicker, refusing treatment, Tanzler soon worried his time with her was running out. Right? He was making her death all about him. By the beginning of 1931, he was routinely having dreams that he had discovered Elena dead and brought her back to his laboratory to see if he could bring her back to life. So that's fun. Then Elena's family moved to a new house, possibly to get the fuck away from him, Now he couldn't find them. For some reason, they didn't tell him where they'd gone. Apparently, night after night, he now went around looking into people's windows like the ghoul he truly was, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Finally, he did. Poor Elena lay in her bed on the brink of death. This dude's out in the bushes, watching her through a window, probably hard as a rock. At this point, Tanzler did not care if her parents wanted him around or not. He felt like he had to see her. So he just let himself into the house. He walked inside as Elena's mother tried to get him to leave. He took her blood pressure. Her pulse was weak. There was a nasty-looking abscess on her leg. He didn't want to overexcite her then, or so he would claim, and now he left. Or maybe his mom kicked him out. But then the next day, he came back with fruit and cakes for Elena. So, I don't know what the fuck's going on. She would only eat a little bit, though. Then the day after that, he had a huge bed delivered, along with a large mosquito net, silk sheets and cushions and a dresser. Apparently, he talked his way again into being around the family, talked to her family and explained that he was going to save her. And then he wanted to shock her, literally. But Tanzler thought he could cure her with a primitive form of electroshock therapy now, which Elena understandably hated but did endure. She did allow him to perform treatments on her anyway. And this is the guy who was warning her about quacks with magic cures. During one of these treatments, she supposedly, again, according to Tanzler, asked him something, saying, "If I must die, all I can leave you is my body, for I'm only a sick girl, so I can't marry you while I'm sick. But you will take care of my body after I'm dead, won't you? But did she say that? I'm going to literally bet my life that never happened. May I be struck dead right now if that happened, God. Satan, Muhammad, Hindu God with fucking lots of weird arms. Creepy, rapey, Zeus God? Anyone listening? All right, still alive. Guess it never happened. According to Tanzler, he promised her that he would take care of her body in death now. And it was the most sacred promise he'd ever made in his life. It was what he considered their marriage vow. He was so batshit. With that, crazy Carl decided it was time to get a ring for her. Again, another ring. On October 11th, 1931, he bought another ring, headed over to Elena's with it, but to his horror, he found Elena was out. Her dad had decided to take her for a walk. Then a few days later, October 16th, when he came over again, he was furious to learn Elena's dad had taken her out of the house another time, this time for a drive. It's almost like they were trying to get away from him. By Friday, October 23rd, Elena was exhausted and drifting in and out of consciousness. And then on Sunday, October 25th, she passed away at the age of just 22. Tanzler had just finished his paperwork at the hospital when Mario, Elena's brother-in-law, rushed over and told him the news. Clearly, as fucking weird as he was, because he had done so much to try and keep her alive, there were those in Elena's family who appreciated him more than I wish they did. At around 5 p.m., Tanzler reached Elena's house. He could hear people moaning and screaming from a block away. The lawn was crowded with a bunch of people. Inside, Elena lay in her bed, a distant, faraway look in her dead eyes. Tanzler is devastated. He would claim that he paid for the funeral, and it seems as if he probably did. And if he did, it likely was not motivated out of generosity for her family. It was selfish. Part of his obsession. It meant that now he got to pick the rose-colored silk-lined casket, the flowers. He got to make decisions about how she would be displayed. Likely he probably changed her outfit himself. Gross. And again, remember, he is doing all of this while sending zero money to his wife and 2 kids that he had dragged across the Atlantic. Fucking narcissist. Her funeral would be October 26th. It drew hundreds of mourners. Throughout it, Carl was remarkably, weirdly calm. Even as he sat beside her coffin, there was still a part of him that, told him Elena wasn't really dead. This feeling was reinforced by the procession of cars that drove from the funeral home to the cemetery. It felt Carl more like a wedding than a funeral. Before the coffin slid shut, he slipped a letter inside that read, "My love for you is greater than ever. You are now free from all your fetters, and you are free to go where you wish. Elena, please come to me, sweetheart. I long so much for you. Tell me, what shall I do? As I cannot live without you. Will you have me, darling? Then take me, or you come to me and stay with me until I can go with you, my sweetheart. Elena!" He wasn't just a creep, he was deeply unwell. Elena was buried at the Star of the Sea Catholic Church's small cemetery. Afterwards, Tanzler went right back to Elena's house. He asked her parents if he could rent her old room, and they agreed, because they badly needed the $5 a month that he would pay them. My God. That's so insane. How many times do you think he buried his nose in her sheets to sniff her scent while also jerking off? How many times a night? Anyone else thinking at least twice? Such a cretin. Or hopeless romantic. Adoring, loyal, up to and beyond death suitor. No, cretin. As he lay in the lavish bed he had bought her, his mind returned to the promise he had made her, to take care of her body. Carl took this to mean he had to keep her in a state of perfection. But as we all know, bodies decay, and in the Florida heat, she was going to decay faster than many. So how was he supposed to take care of her body? In a moment of inspiration, he realized that it was his duty to erect a grand mausoleum, both as a testament of his love for her and as a way to remove her from the grave. So he bought a large plot around Elena's grave, big enough for a family tomb, and hired a mason to help him bring his vision to life. And he would pay that mason with money that should have gone to his kids. But there was a problem with his plan. There were actually so many problems. But there was one main problem I'd like to talk about next. Because Tanzler planned to build the ornate crypt over the plot where Elena was currently buried, he had to get a disinterment permit to remove her body from her underground grave. So, with the Hoyos family and the state of Florida's permission, Elena now made her second trip to a funeral home. She will wait there for 3 months while construction took place. When completed, the final version looked more like a family house than a tomb, with a sloping roof held up by ornate Greek pillars and a door with a triangular window. He had also decided that he would have Elena rebedded, put in another casket. Into this other, more expensive casket, he put new sheets, pillows, sterile cotton, gauze, more chemicals and sprays to preserve her. He also put in the jewelry he had given Elena while she was still alive. And now it was time to open the old casket. Working with the mortician, Tanzler eased the casket open, and he would later write, "As the first step, I sprayed diluted formalin all over the shrouded body in ample quantities. This was for disinfection, and also to harden the body tissues before we undertook to detach from the skin the drapery which had become glued to it. Decay had set in a most disheartening manner. Only with the greatest care I was able to peel the pieces of textile from the body. This took hours. We then lifted the body out of the coffin and laid it on a table on a clean sheet. Having sprayed the body all over again, I now proceeded to sponge her face with a specially prepared solution, and also her hands and feet. With dismay, I discovered that in view of the damage already done, much more cleaning was required than we could do in one night. I had the morgue at my disposal. When morning came, my sweet bride was free from all outward signs of decay and from that of odor. When the mortician came to work, we placed her on thick layers of cotton, and after I sprayed her form all over with eau de cologne, we now covered it all around with similar layers. They then lifted her into the new coffin, but if the mortician thought that their task was over now, Tanzler would surprise him with a follow-up request. He needed another night, alone, in the embalming room. And he would apparently get this night alone in the morgue a few days later. On that night, he took Elena out of her coffin again, probably jerked off, maybe molested her corpse, almost certainly did not pull out and try to make a zombie baby, and he definitely put her in something called an incubator tank. Then he poured a, quote, nourishing body cell solution into the top of the tank until it was completely full. Not sure what the solution was, some recipe of his own mad scientist making. And with that, he was satisfied that Elena's process of decomposition had been fully halted. The next day, he had her transported into his special vault. Outside on a custom-made headstone, it read, Elena Milagro Hoyos. Born July 31st, 1908. Died October 25th, 1931. R.I.P. And then Count D. Castle, which is what he was calling himself now. Yes, this motherfucker put his own fake name on her gravestone. He signed her fucking mausoleum like her corpse was his art piece. And now he has a new problem. If Elena's body was perfectly preserved and her mausoleum was built, what was Tanzler supposed to do with his free time? Support his kids? Yeah, right. What would he get out of that? Possibly their love? Possibly the adoration of two people he didn't even want to fuck? No, thank you. For the next 18 months, he would simply spend most of his free time sitting next to her tomb. Yep. Totally normal. Tanzler would say he had some interesting experiences during that time. Yeah, I bet he did. One evening, as he was sitting in the Florida heat, he said he heard a loud crash from inside the tomb. He said he then went inside and saw that the locks that held the metal casket closed had sprung open. And this, to Tanzler, was evidence that Elena was playing a practical joke on him. And when he heard a tapping come from inside the coffin, well, that seemed to confirm that. Interesting conclusion to jump to first. What is she doing while dead? Not coming back to visit her parents, not checking in on her sisters. Oh, no, she's coming back to play a practical joke on her weird stalker. Tanzler immediately opened the coffin, which was actually two boxes, an inner box and an outer box. And as soon as he opened the inner box, he smelled a pleasant perfume-like fragrance, like a young woman's skin on a warm summer's day, he said. After that, he started talking to Elena. And one day, when he put his ear against the valve of the inner coffin, he could have sworn he heard her talking back to him. He was losing what little was left of his mind. That was all Carl said he needed to spring back into action. Now he would spend his days buying Elena presents. Deliver them back to her tomb. Handkerchiefs, a Spanish shawl, a comb, cases of makeup. You know how it be. The usual shit that zombies crave. Then soon he would see something else. This very stable-minded, man wrote, I changed my visiting hours further into the night. It was the time of the full moon, and the cemetery was almost as brightly lit as in daytime. So it could not have been that my eyes deceived me when on my next visit I saw a veiled white figure at the entrance to the tomb. As he moved closer to this figure, he said it started moving closer to him. And then when he was just a few feet away, the figure disappeared. Oh, more practical jokes. Oh, just a jokester now that you're dead. But he said he could hear Elena's voice still, though, singing to him after this apparition disappeared, calling to him, telling him she wanted to be with him. And so now Carl made a new plan. On Easter weekend 1933, April 15th or 16th, Carl waited for the sun to set, and then he put on a freshly ironed tuxedo. This is so fucking crazy. Next, he double-checked everything he'd assembled before taking a wagon, blanket, cushions, and rope into the cemetery. Then he went into the mausoleum. What he did next was pretty difficult because the coffins, were very heavy. So Carl pushed, shoved, pulled, finally maneuvered the inner coffin onto the grass outside of the tomb. He then loaded Elena's corpse onto the little wagon he had brought. Before departing, he put the blanket and the crucifix on the top of the casket, and then he was off. In his memoirs, written in Zephyr Hills, Florida, after he would leave Key West, he would write about how he felt that very night. Oh, I was hard that night, dear God, I was so hard. Throbbing. Felt like it was going to pop. We then went at it, like animals, or rather like one animal, furiously humping a dead and rotting carcass. A dead and rotting, perfect, super sexy carcass. I'm pretty sure I came into her brain that night. And then 60 or so seconds later, a small creature crawled out from betwixt her legs, a baby, a zombie baby. And it called out for me, Father! And I took it into my arms, and I held it as I walked to the nearest sewer grate. I set it down. I pressed it into the opening. I kicked it until I kicked it through the grate. And now I know not what has become of it since. Okay, here's what he really wrote. A wonderfully elated feeling took complete possession of my entire being, as though a second spirit had entered my soul. It seemed that a bodyguard of veiled angels had formed on both sides and were coming along with us, and a great inspiration filled me then. It made me feel like a victor, holding the triumphal entry in a world forgotten and buried. I felt secure, protected, and invulnerable. No matter what was coming against us now, nothing could harm either one of us anymore. There was no place for the living here on this blackest of nights. All of the cemetery was alive with souls which came out of the graves from all sides, moving and thronging all around us. It's the thriller night. They were everywhere, none blocking our way, but all of them melting out of our way. Okay, it was as if we were delighted and desirous to help us, or they were. The little cart, for all its weight, seemed almost to run by itself. Oh, what a jolly little festival thing happening here. It responded to the slightest touch of my hand, which gave me the impression of being aided on by friendly hands reaching out of the ground. Oh, the corpses are helping him get his corpse bride. It's like a fucking weird Tim Burton animation. When he'd almost gotten her body out of the cemetery, disaster struck. As Carl struggled to get the coffin over the cemetery fence, he sank into the mud, and then the whole load fell on top of him, and a foul-smelling liquid dripped all over him. Most men would have vomited here. Probably turned Carl on. He maybe used his lube and jerked off. He probably loved it. It was Elena's foul-smelling liquid. Finally, after whatever he did, Carl was able to get the casket over to a little house he had rented for this exact purpose, a waypoint. Since there was no running water, it was more of a shed than a house. He had to wash himself and his clothes with a bottle of whiskey he found on a shelf. Then, leaving her body there, he headed home, walking the dark streets of Key West in his liquor and corpse fluid-soaked wedding tuxedo on his way to the room he still rented from Elena's parents. Once inside, he snuck into the bathroom, probably jerked off, scrubbed down, washed their dead daughter's fluids off of him. Next day, he left the coffin where it was. But the day after that, he took Elena's corpse from the rented house and loaded her into a large sedan. Come fly with me and be my wife, my heart thy resting place will be. An old German song Carl's mother used to sing to him, played over and over in his mind as he pulled onto the hospital grounds and up next to his small plane, but really just a small part of a small plane, where he loaded Elena's body into the cabin. Around her were all the things that she would need to be, quote, cozy. Her clothes, bridal dress, veil, flowers, jewelry, and stockings. After getting her situated, he then started taking her out of the coffin. And how did Elena Hoyos look 2 years after her death? Not good. Really not fucking good. Very, very rotten. Muy malo. Muy muerte. Muy apestosa. Despite essentially being in a vat of Carl's special solution, she looked like fucking shit. Of course she did. She's been dead, for a long, long fucking time. Ay, ay, ay. Her eyes were deep, empty black holes. Her lips were dried up. And it was really, I guess, closer to a year and a half than 2 years. But still, year and a half's dead for a long time. Her eyes were deep, empty black holes. Her lips were all dried up. Her teeth poked out of her tight and thin-lipped mouth. Her hair glued together and to herself. Maggots. There was maggots literally feeding on her head, ears, stomach. Her clothes were basically slimy sludge, some of it glued to her skin. He would spend days now painstakingly removing bits of cloth from her skin, washing her, dumping the fetid sludge into the ocean. When she was finally uncovered, now dead and completely naked, he kissed her lips, and he breathed into her lungs until her chest inflated, or so he said, claimed, reassuring Elena that he would love her forever, no matter the state of her body. This guy is such a ghoul. This shit might have made Ed Gein squeamish or vomit. He did make some changes now. He wanted to replace her eyes, which were basically completely gone. So he used a catalog from the hospital to order 2 glass ones. Then he put splints on Elena's nose, kept it in place with bandages, since it was at risk of kind of melting into her face, Next, he straightened out one of her arms, since it had frozen into a cramped up position while she was in the casket. Oh yeah, you're going to be real stiff after this. She wasn't doing any yoga in there. He also wanted to make a permanent, non-perishable record of her face, a death mask. He used oil silk to cover her face, eyes, and hairs, glass eyes, hoping to get a perfect impression of how she looked. Well, how she looked after she'd been dead for a long time, but whatever. The solution, though, then stuck to Elena's skin. He felt he had no choice but to put oiled silk all over the rest of her body, now, since he believed that it would help discourage maggots and other infestations. By this point, Elena's corpse was basically a mummy. For months, he would now tend carefully to his mummy, feeding her vitamins and other solutions that he thought would bring her back to life. Oh, vitamins, I guess he thought would turn her glass fucking eyes back into real ones. According to him, she did look more lively after these treatments. In the meantime, some changes at the Marine Hospital were about to unsettle Carl's everyday existence. The commander of the naval station, which the hospital was a part of, died, and his successor was much younger, did not kiss corpses, and refused to allow Tanzler to continue storing his partial airplane on government property. But there was an upside to this. It did allow Tanzler to now figure out a place for him and Elena to live together. After telling Elena's parents goodbye, he moved out of their place into a new house, a sort of open shed on the beach, and he brought his partial airplane with him. In fact, Mario Medina would actually help him move the plane, having no idea that he was helping Carl steal his sister-in-law's remains. Meanwhile, in Zephyr Hills, one of Carl Tanzler's 2 daughters, a poor little girl named Crystal, suddenly died of diphtheria. Oh well, not his problem. He's busy enough with one corpse. Doris and her grieving family thought that Carl would surely come back for the funeral, especially after Doris wrote him, asking him to do so, asking for his support. But he did not go to the funeral, nor did he send a single dime. He was entirely devoted to Elena, and he needed to save his money, right, to fucking bring her back to life. So he continued to live in his ghoul shed now, with his corpse bride. This ghoul shed had once been part of the old butcher pens where cattle were slaughtered in the area, their blood flowing directly into the sea. It's perfect. Fucking perfect. At least it was on the beach, though. This ghoul shed and in Carl's half plane is where Carl and Elena would live together for 2 years as Carl renovated this place, built a laboratory that would include a volt transformer, x-ray machine, operating table, and then he would also, go to work at the hospital. When he wasn't at work or taking in beautiful sights of the Atlantic Ocean, he was naturally working on Elena. He wrote, "All work on Elena has been for the purpose of arresting and delaying further deterioration of the body tissue. Mummification had partially set in. This, however, was not beyond resurrection. The revival of the dried-up cells merely consumes, and I never gave up hope while I have a will. Now I began mixing plasma solutions in sufficient quantities, adjusting, testing, cooling, heating elements." So he still thought he could resurrect her. After giving her body a long bath in this plasma solution, he would take Elena out, put her on his x-ray table for a 5-minute radiation treatment, then return her to her incubation tank. Truly mad scientist shit. Maybe. He might have just fucking made all this shit up. Was he doing all this? Did he actually have enough electricity in his fucking ghoul shed to run this equipment? I don't know. Either way, Tanzler was convinced that he was closer than ever to bring her back to life. After all, he said, her once gaunt body was now plump with fluid, taking her from 60 pounds to around 90 pounds. Oh, yay! She was plump enough to pump out 2 more zombie babies after she and Carl made love on occasions when he did not pull out. And again, he kicked them through sewer grates, and they scurried off to do God knows what while he went on with his life. To supplement his treatments, Carl would play Elena music, believing that the vibrating sound waves would help further restore her. But then another problem arose, a new obstacle in Carl's very reasonable resurrection scheme. By 1935, with the end of the Great Depression still nowhere in sight, Key West trolleys had shut down. 80% of its population was unemployed. Public services like police officers, firemen, sanitation, pretty much non-existent. The city's once famous cigar factories had moved to Tampa. And the only other industry, the sponge industry randomly, ended up getting fucking wiped out by marine disease. And that meant, of course, a sharp rise in crime. Key West residents, many of them already used to stealing here and there to make ends meet, now started venturing into people's homes and vehicles, and soon Tanzler felt it was only a matter of time before someone came in and discovered Elena in his ghoul shed and took her before he could realive her. So he dismantled the incubation tank, took her out, wrapped her again in silk, so, fucking asshole insects would not further desiccate her. Around this time, he also lost his job at the Marine Hospital due to cutbacks, although he still had some form of income. Some mysterious checks kept arriving. Potentially, he was getting paid for possible service in the German army during World War I if he didn't actually go to Australia for as long as he said, but I think he probably did. He was probably getting some form of inheritance. Anyway, some kind of money. And now we cut to Christmas, 1935. It was a quiet one. Tanzler decorated a little Christmas tree with silver tinsel, cotton snow, little wax candles. He wrapped up a pile of gifts. On Christmas Eve, he had been feeling festive, so he'd opened a bottle of wine, took a sip, went over to Elena's body and baby birded it into what was left of her mouth. Was she wearing lingerie while he did that, you think? It's not impossible. He had been with her corpse daily now for over 32 months, over 2.5 years. She'd been dead for over 4. Then 1936 would bring more changes, more in addition to further decomposition. The peace and solitude Tanzler enjoyed at his home on the beach was interrupted further in 1936 by workers from FDR's Works Project Administration. Damn you bastards! The program they were employed by was designed to give steady paychecks to people who worked for the government, who in turn would spend those paychecks on consumer goods, which would jumpstart the economy. In theory, and to a large extent, it did. One of the greatest governmental decisions in the history of this country, in my opinion, did so much for our infrastructure, gave so many Americans blue-collar jobs. In Key West, workers were recruited to create, amongst other things, massive public arts projects, as well as to clean up the beaches. And all those people on the beach made it impossible for Tanzler to keep up with his experiments on Elena. And to make things even worse, the person in charge seemed to have a grudge against him. He said they dynamited something on the beach that shook the walls of his ghoul shed. No longer feeling safe, he decided he had to move. And he found a new place on Flagler Ave, about 2 miles from Old Town. Another wooden shack, another ghoul shed. Ghoul shed 2. But Tanzler didn't mind. Most important thing was that it was secluded. Between April 30th and May 28th, 1936, he moved his supplies over there. Once settled into his new ghoul shed, there wouldn't be enough room for the partial airplane to poke into the structure. I guess he'd been keeping her in the cockpit most of the time when she wasn't getting treatments. So he brought Elena into the bedroom now. And in the bedroom, he would sleep with her every night, occasionally discovering that she had leaked a little bit of a fluid, but he would refill it. In the mornings, he would play organ music for her, as one does. He would make breakfast, eggs, toast, and tea, which he would leave on her bedside table, but she barely nibbled on it. June 1st, 1938, Carl wrote an interesting letter about this time. I've done it. She has given birth to 2 zombie babies. One I kicked into the sewer. The other I keep up here in the cage. In my laboratory in 3 days' time, it has grown as big as its father, feeding only on dead rotting flesh I have found along the beach. I am to keep it and use its organs and pieces for my sweet bride. Yes, Eureka! I shall rebuild the mother from the child. The mother from the child, I tell you, I'll rebuild the mother from the child. My bride will yet live again. Here's what he really wrote. Dear sister. Yes, he's writing his sister. Last night I had a dream, but it seemed more like reality. I spent the whole night with father and mother. Elena, too, was with me. We were talking quietly and peacefully when Elena, who had been in a death-like coma, woke up suddenly. It was wonderful to see her elation in this new world. She was wearing a new pink dress. The color of her eyes had changed from dark brown to blue. Now, as I write this down, I have a feeling that I have moved and I am standing right in the threshold of this eternal space. It is as if only a thin veil separates me from it. I am convinced now that mother and father are living happily together in that eternal life, and I am so glad that it has moved so close to me, or else I have moved close to it. With love, your brother Carl. The fuck? Did his sister know he was living with a corpse now? A corpse he romantically loved? It seems as if she might have. How would you handle that if it was your brother, right? What would you write back? So would Elena ever really wake up? Of course not. Of course not. That's not how the shit works. She is maximum dead. She's been maximum dead for years. But according to Crazy Carl, yeah, she did. He claimed that soon after that letter to his sister, following this dream, as the two lay together in their marital bed, in their death marital bed, he saw Elena's hands moving, And when he checked her fingers out, her arm supposedly lifted up and pressed firmly against his face. Then when he kissed her hand, she opened her eyes, her glass eyes, mind you, and looked at him with eyes that could not see, with eyes that could not have lenses, and then attempted to get up, and he pushed her back down gently, telling her, no, darling, you must get your strength back first. And then he went to get her some tea. But when he came back, she was in that same position, rigid. Was her reawakening over as soon as it had begun? Apparently not, as he then gave her a bath shortly after this, and went to wrap her in another layer of silk and wax. She spoke. She said, "Take my bridal dress. It is soiled anyhow." Tanzler agreed. He thought this was a good idea. He cut off the soiled parts, wrapped her body in the rest of the dress, which he then sealed with wax and balsam. Then Elena, who could now speak German, apparently, began to sing in that language. One particular song was a favorite of his. In English, its title translates to, "How can I part from thee? How can I leave thee?" Oh, he for sure did not hallucinate all of that, did he? Oh, no way, Jose. He definitely wasn't super fucking insane. Not everything was going super well, though. There were some troubling signs that Carl couldn't ignore. Without the incubator, desiccation had set in. Elena was drying out, going from 90 down to 70 pounds, and down to 60, then 50, and then maybe a little under 40. Whoa, getting real skinny. And this worried him and distracted him. And on March 2nd, 1940, recently turned 63-year-old corpse fucker, Carl Tanzler, slipped and fell to the deck frames of a boat he was working on. Yeah, he also had a boat, okay? This crazy fuck had a ghoul shed, a second one, part of a plane, a corpse bride, and a whole boat. Do you even have one of those things? No? Then what the fuck are you doing with your life? Huh? Wasting it, that's what. Now, stuck in the boat, and with several broken ribs now, Tanzler was paralyzed with fear. What would happen to Elena if he couldn't make it back? Would she die? Finally, he was able to crawl out and hobble back to the shack. Oh, thank God, she's still there. Elena's condition and his injury depressed him greatly, though. Then in September of 1940, some good news. Tanzler heard Elena's voice calling out to him again. Hide me somewhere, she said. He was confused. What? She was in bed with him, like always. What place could be safer than their bed? And then he thought, no, she's right. My wife is right again. I do need to hide her. I've gotten sloppy. I've been buying too much soap, so much soap, and jewelry and other presents for a young woman in town, even though, for all anybody knew, I wasn't dating anybody. But how would he keep Elena comfortable? How would he keep her comfortable and maintain a low profile at the same time? Well, some more bad news comes. September 28th, 1940, Tanzler receives an unexpected visitor. It was Mario. Not Super Mario, not a fun Mario, Mario Medina, Elena's brother-in-law. Luckily, he didn't go into Carl's bedroom, didn't find Elena, but he was there because of Elena. He told Carl, Elena's tomb had been broken into, and her coffin seems to have been tampered with. They finally figured this out, 7.5 years after it happened. Tanzler now went with Mario to the cemetery, where he found Elena's sister, Nana, Mr. Bethel, the sexton, and Mr. Pritchard, the undertaker. Elena's sister immediately said she wanted the coffin to be opened. Thankfully, the two cemetery workers on duty did not seem want to get into it, pun intended, and they said that things were probably fine. Indeed, nobody, except for secretly Tanzler, wanted to see a body that had been dead for roughly 9 years now. However, Elena's sister was suspicious. Her suspicion would not go away, and 3 days later, October 1st, 1940, Nana went to the gravesite again, demanded the coffin be opened. Like her sister, Nana also had tuberculosis. The disease had actually claimed the lives of Elena's parents already. She wanted to make sure that her sister was at peace before she died. This time a crowd gathered, and Tanzler rushed over. The sexton, Mr. Bethel, handed Tanzler a piece of rusty iron and a pair of rusty scissors, but Tanzler couldn't do it. He couldn't open it. Instead, he pulled Nana aside and told her, "Okay, you can see Elena. She's over at my house in bed." Now, he told her that as if she might understand. Oh! Ha! Well, why didn't you say that? Oh, a few days ago, you silly old necrophiliac goose. Oh, my heck, gosh dang, that's great news. I just didn't want her body to have been lost. Glad she's being put to good use. Nana and Mario followed him home. They walked into the bedroom, where Tanzler announced that Elena was at peace, resting in her silk clothes with all her jewelry. Then he pulled back the curtain around the bed, and there she was. And Nana was thrilled. She immediately cried tears of joy and hugged Carl. "Gracias, eres un hombre maravilloso." No, Nana was fucking shocked. She could not believe her eyes. Her sister's corpse was less than a corpse. More of a patchwork Frankenstein monster. Reconstruct with wax and cosmetics. She turned to Tanzler, asked him how long her sister had been there. And he was like, 7 years. Nana, still unable to process what was going on, said, no, this is not Elena. Nope. She now demanded to go back to the cemetery and open the coffin. But then Mario said, what's the use? You know she's here. Or maybe it happened that way. Again, this is Tanzler's retelling. In Tanzler's version, Nana calmly asked him to put Elena back in her coffin now. But later, both she and Mario would recall being fucking horrified by what they'd seen when they spoke to authorities. They immediately left, and Tanzler, because he's crazy Carl, seemingly believed that everything was going to be fine now. That he'd shown Nana and Mario, how well he had taken care of Elena. You're welcome. And they obviously would now let him keep her body until he too died, at which point they would do the right thing and put the both of them in the mausoleum. For 5 days, Tanzler just went on with his life, totally oblivious, just thinking everything's going to be great. Feeding his zombie son in his fucking cage. Thankfully, no one had seen him, and fucking his corpse bride. But then, October 5th, 1940, a motorcade headed by 2 sheriffs, the then Justice of the Peace, and a funeral car stopped in front of Tanzler's shack. I know, Tanzler. The sheriff had a warrant charging Tanzler with being in possession of a dead body. What? Oh, come on, fascists! I thought this was the land of the free, home of the brave. A place for those free and brave enough to take a corpse home and care for it and make love to it for over 7 years. But I guess we live in China. As Tanzler was sadly taken into custody. Not sure if authorities found his zombie son in the cage or not, and if any charges were filed against him for being a zombie. 2 funeral attendants went into the house and carried Elena's remains out on a wicker basket. Or I guess in one. Tanzler had no idea that it would be the last time he would see Elena's body. At the courthouse, Tanzler would tell his story. How Elena had died, her burial and disinterment, reinterment in the tube, the incubation tank he had made for her at his expense, thank you. He would be held on $1,000 bail, which he could not afford, for, quote, wanton and maliciously demolishing, disfiguring, and destroying a grave. Boo! Let the man live! Who was he hurting? Who was he hurting that was still alive? No one. Well, no one until her sister found out, at least. Then I guess he's maybe kind of hurting her, and probably some other people. This news would spread like wildfire through southern Florida, drawing crowds of journalists and photographers who all wanted a scoop on this strange story. Of course it did. On October 7th, 1940, the edition of the Key West Citizen, the front page headline read, Hold Von Kossel on malicious and wanton charges. Warrant served this afternoon. Case attracts interest throughout nation. Not the best title. Kind of weak, actually. The article that followed read, At a late hour this afternoon, county officials were investigating the process of law to follow in the case of Carl Van Kossel, who has been formally charged with malicious and wanton disfigurement of a burial vault in the city cemetery when he removed the body of Elena de Hoyos to his home in defiance of state health laws. Elaine? It's Elena? What kind of crackpot journalism is this? Key West was abuzz with talk today concerning one of the most interesting stories ever to break in this or any other city of the nation. And according to observance, the rest of the nation is going to hear of the story too, for 2 leading news services have placed it on their wire and telephoto releases to subscribing members. Carl Tanzler Van Kossel, a resident of Key West for the past 10 years, is the center of attention here today. According to the scientist, he had come to the end of a long trail, which started with a dream he had back in Germany, which had compelled him to search the world over for the beautiful lady pictured in that vision. He found her in Key West, only to lose her, at least temporarily, when she died at the hospital and was buried in the city cemetery. I wish a better journalist would have written that. Better than nothing, though. Scientist. Did go on to describe how he had moved her and lived with her for 7 years. But nobody knew exactly what was going on there. Was Tanzler insane, an extreme romantic, a mad scientist, all 3? I think mostly the first one. Weirdly enough, a lot of people seem to have a fair amount of sympathy for him. After all, this was the era of doomed love. In 2 years, Casablanca would come out to critical acclaim, would go on to become one of the most enduring romance stories of all time. Some women thought that what Tanzler had done was marvelously romantic, and a crowd of women even came from Tampa to meet him. Oh yeah, of course. I mean, Ted fucking Bundy had a bunch of fawning admirers, right? Like attracts like, sick attracts sick. Many of these women likely believed that Tanzler was the person he had advertised himself to be, a high-born, multi-degree genius on the cusp of a scientific breakthrough, the most important of all time. Someone who had figured out how to stop decay, maybe perhaps even death. And this, being the beginning of World War II, many people were eager for some news that had nothing to do with bombings, Nazis, or global chaos. The general consensus seemed to be that Tanzler should be freed, and Elena's body should be returned to her family's custody. Lewis A. Harris, a local attorney, would defend Crazy Carl in court. He would fight for Tanzler on October 8th during a hearing at the county courthouse that was presided over by Peace Justice Enrique Esquinaldo Jr. There were 3 legal aspects that needed to be figured out. The charge of destroying a grave, Tanzler's sanity, and another law that forbade, quote, the unauthorized disinterring of a body of a deceased human being. At the hearing, Elena's sister, Florinda Nana Medina, would speak, describing how she became suspicious that something was not right with her sister's grave. The courtroom shivered as she described what she'd seen at Tanzler's ghoul shed. Your Honor, it was the most grotesque thing I've ever seen in my life. Her hair was still on her head. She had glass eyes. Her arms and legs were like sticks with stockings. It was a monster. It was horrible. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. Tanzler immediately stood up and protested, shouting, "How dare you! Don't talk about my sexy bride like that! May I remind you that I was happily sleeping with that glass-eyed, stick-limbed monster? For God's sake, our son could hear this! Any number of our kids could hear this right now. They've probably escaped from the sewer. They could be anywhere." No, of course, that never happened. Next, Nana said that she wanted to know what had Tanzler been doing with Elena's body. Had he just been sleeping next to it or something else? Esquinaldo asked Tanzler the same question. Tanzler vehemently denied that he had molested her corpse. Then when it was Tanzler's time to share his side of the story in full, he painted a story of doomed love, how he had met Elena when she had gotten sick, what he had done for her, how he had known that she was the woman of his dreams the first time he saw her. "I brought her back to life, Your Honor," he said. "There was always life left in the body," he added, "that could be resurrected even if the physical body was asleep." For some wild reason, the justice of the peace did not seem to buy that. Esquinaldo announced that what was left of Elena would be buried, that she was definitely, unquestionably very dead, and that the court would convene to decide whether or not to bring Tanzler to trial. Then Tanzler asked, "Now may I have Elena's body back?" And the justice snapped, "No! No, you may not. You may not have the body back. You are no relative to Mrs. Hoyos. You have no claim to the body." And with that, Tanzler snapped. He said this was not justice, that he had done everything for Elena, everything, and that meant that she was his. But the court held firm. Elena would be buried at a secret location now, and Tanzler could fuck off. Meanwhile, hundreds of people from all around swamped the Lopez funeral home to view Elena's infamous remains, which an Orlando newspaper termed past all recognition as a human body, modeled by the skillful hands of Van Kossel into a wax-like statuette. Okay. In her casket, Elena wore a blue rayon robe and a pair of black house slippers. A square of cheesecloth covered her chalky face with its glass eyes and matted wig of short, straight, dark brown hair. The manager of the funeral home would later say that almost 7,000 people came to see the body. And their reaction did not lead to outrage. Weirdly enough, reports about Elena's body caused more people to show their support for Tanzler, and support spread across the state. A good reminder that oftentimes, really the majority of people in a situation, in a culture, they actually get shit wrong. Jack Hartman Linton and Mrs. Nettis Linton of Deerfield Beach, Florida, and Mrs. M. Selman of New York City wrote a joint letter to the, quote, proper authorities that read in part, "In these times, with the world's lust to kill and destroy, it is no more than expected for the mob to unjustly crucify. But if by miracle a person such as Professor Von Kossel, not a professor, could succeed in restoring to life a deceased person, the greatest discovery of all ages would have been made." These fucking idiots. He's not some necromancer. The letter continued with, "Even if the chances be 1,000,000 to 1 against his chance of success, it was worth the try." But was it? Past history reveals that most of our great scientists have been unjustly labeled by the majority who could neither follow nor comprehend, which in reality was an inner, hidden grudge against anyone who had the courage and intelligence to further the progress of the world. Okay, I mean, they're actually kind of making a good argument, but I still don't like it. We feel that not only should he be liberated with compensation, but also that he should be permitted to carry on with the subject with the permission of the subject's custodians. Wow. He should get to keep her corpse and be compensated. Really? Tanzler's psychiatric evaluation would take place at the courthouse on Thursday, October 10th. Wild how the justice system worked so fast back in the day. Members of the so-called Sanity Board were Dr. William R. Warren, Dr. H.C. Gailey, and Mrs. Gilmore Park, Secretary to County Judge Raymond R. Lord. Their hearing lasted a little over an hour. The court, interestingly enough, would find Carl perfectly sane. And then he would be released on October 12th after two wealthy Key West citizens offered up his bail. Soon, however, law enforcement would have a little more info about the kind of person Tanzler really was when they got a letter from his estranged wife, Doris. She said she would be happy to testify about his sanity and mentioned that, quote, his mind is troubled on account of many ways. But for some reason, she was never called to testify. Seemingly, the court believed Tanzler when he told them that he had separated from Doris back in Germany and later heard that she had moved in with his sister in the U.S. So he got away with being a deadbeat husband, deadbeat dad as well. Tanzler had more lies for the scores of journalists who now wanted to interview him. He said he had a coconut plantation in the South Seas, okay, and that he'd almost died in India one time when he was put in a morgue before he heard a man's voice saying he would be buried at 5 o'clock and then he woke up. What? Cool story, bro. He claimed he had been originally held at Ellis Island when he had immigrated and that his sister in Elizabeth, New Jersey, put up a $20,000 bond so he'd be let in. He said he stayed in New York for a year, but that was too darn cold. The press could not get enough of his stories. They loved him. A Havana radio station, CMQ, even began running a nightly soap opera based on this whole fucking thing. The show caused such a sensation that the Cuban government forced it off the air and then sent a delegation aboard SS Cuba to investigate the curious going-ons in Key West. Not everyone believed Tanzler's tales of doomed romance. Thank God. The headline of the November 2nd, 1940 edition of Miami Life read, Key Wester used body to gratify sex passion. As the article stated, Tanzler was undoubtedly criminally insane. The evidence offered by the effigy he manufactured with cloth, wax, hair, and whatnot is damning proof of his perversion, of his unspeakable intentions towards the bones of a girl for whom he professed love. His next step might be murder for the sake of acquiring another body upon which he might satiate his unearthly and abnormal desires. Von Kassel should be put away by American authorities or deported. The latter probably would be the best punishment that could be given him. Hail Nimrod. Finally, someone speaking some sense. Meanwhile, after docking at the Key West Harbor, October 22nd, 1940, the Cuban delegation learned from reading the Miami Herald the answer to the question people all over were waiting to find out. Van Kassel will not be punished. According to the paper, the Monroe County grand jury decided Tanzler would not be prosecuted for any more crimes. He was free to go to figure out how to live the rest of his life without his beloved body. Tanzler, who had little money left, began charging $25 a person for a grand tour of his home, the ghoul shed he had shared with Elena's corpse, which of course included his own personal commentary. But then Key West would become too much for him to handle. He did not care for the notoriety. Everywhere he went, people accosted him on the streets. Not everybody a fan. Some people understood he was a sick fuck. So he decided to pack it up and head to Zephyr Hills to be with his sister, who was reportedly having health problems. And I guess to hide from his estranged wife and, his remaining child that he had abandoned, since they were also still living there. First, though, before he left, he had something to do. At 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 a.m., he snuck into the cemetery, slipped inside the mausoleum that he had built for Elena. Was that what you were expecting? He spent a few hours there reminiscing and resting before he placed a few sticks of dynamite and a timer in a wooden door jamb and then headed out. On April 14th, 1941, Carl left Key West dressed in his black tuxedo, bow tie, and his best fedora. He began his trek up the overseas highway at 9 p.m. A few hours later, there was a massive explosion. Well, not massive, but an explosion, and part of Elena's tomb, where she was no longer interred, was destroyed. When Carl read about that in the paper, I bet he was satisfied. Actually, he wrote that he was. By the time he got to his sister's house, towing his half-built airplane, he can't fucking let go of it, behind him, he was in a good mood. But his sister wondered if him living there was maybe not such a good idea. She was horrified by what Tanzler had done, not only to Elena, but to his wife Doris and their teenage daughter, who lived just down the road. And then as Carl took over her house with his fleet of possessions and equipment, never once offering to help, his sister grew angrier and angrier. Meanwhile, unable to work on his memoirs with his sister banging around the house, he retreated out to the yard and got into his airplane to write them. So now he's living in the cockpit of his still not rebuilt small plane, parked at his sister's yard. As all of this was happening, the war in Europe was heating up, and by 1942, the U.S. was in the thick of it. Because a German in an airplane, even a small, unfinished one, looked somewhat suspicious, Tanzler was ordered by the government to take the wheels off his plane, which then tilted the cabin at an uncomfortable angle. Good. Soon he had an unexpected visitor, Doris. Apparently not as mad at him as she could have been, Doris took the initiative and brought him to the place where his daughter, Crystal, had been buried. She cried softly as he quietly looked down for the first time at their child's burial place. Soon he would make a memorial for her, a simple arch with a cross on top that read, Crystal Tanzler, our darling. Not exactly a mausoleum. At the foot of the slab, he placed a handmade cement urn. Tanzler, being Tanzler, though, most of his energy would still be devoted to one thing, his memoir about Elena. While he waited for publishers to get back to him, he made watercolors, images of him and Elena flying to heaven. Oh, fun. And portraits of her in the ocean. Then sometime in 1944, Tanzler moved away from his sister's house to a little place of his own after freeloading there for 3 fucking years. He moved into a rural residence still in Pasco County, Florida. Still never did shit to help his remaining daughter, that worthless fuck. This move allowed him to erect a suitable indoor shrine to Elena now, something his sister refused to allow him to do in her home for some reason. On a long table inside this crude little house, he put Elena's casket, and inside the casket, he put one of his plaster death masks atop a remake of her body. Fuck! He just won't quit! On top of the coffin were pictures of her from when she was alive, her rosary and crucifix hung on the wall. Meanwhile, Fantastic Adventures, this pulp publication, agreed to print The Secret of Elena's Tomb, his memoir. One of the sources we used for this. In Tanzler's letter requesting money, he said the manuscript was 70,000 words, including illustrations, but only about 37,000 words, and no illustrations would show up in the published version. It was upsetting for him, but it was the only deal he could get for it. That same year, 1944, in Key West, both Mario and Florinda Nana Medina died. Mario was electrocuted accidentally February 12th, trying to rescue a fellow worker when the crane he was operating hit a power line. Nana, who had been ill for quite some time, succumbed to tuberculosis on April 23rd at the age of 40. And with that, the entire Hoyos family was dead. And so where did Elena end up? 3 people were entrusted with her burial. Key West Police Chief Bienvenido Perez, Lopez Funeral Home undertaker Benjamin Sawyer, and cemetery sexton Otto Bethel. The 3 people promised each other that they would never ever reveal where she had been reburied. In order to hide the burial further, they dismembered Elena, put what was left of her into an 18-inch square casket, which was buried more discreetly. Some think she was buried somewhere in the old cemetery. Others think she was buried behind one of Key West's oldest homes. Some think she was buried behind the Catholic Church. On September 5th, 1947, the quirky pulp publication featuring Crazy Carl's story hit the newsstands. Once again, he's in the limelight, but what little money he had made didn't last long, and soon he was destitute, unable to afford rent or food. Good. But his estranged wife, Doris, would step in to save him. She would give him $2.50 a week, even though he did not fucking deserve it. $2.50 from her $15 a week salary, and she would keep him alive. Ugh, why? 1950, Carl, now 73 years old, received his certificate of United States citizenship with a peculiar addendum. Typed on the back of his citizenship papers was notification of a name change. He'd wanted to change his name for years now, from Carl Tanzler to Carl Tanzler von Kossel. Count Carl, to be precise. 2 years later, after Carl had not showed up for his daily walks around town, 2 neighbors checked his home. They found mail piling up on the front porch. They called the sheriff, who found Tanzler's badly decomposing body lying on the floor next to the casket. He was 76. And the sheriff immediately started fucking his corpse. It was what Carl would have wanted. And now a new zombie baby was made. Would it grow up and find its half-siblings further south? Not sure. The date of death on Carl's certificate would be listed as July 1952, exact day unknown. And so on August 14th, Tanzler was now buried at the Zephyr Hill Cemetery near his daughter Crystal. Did not deserve that. Doris would not pass away until 1977, nearly 3 decades later, and she would still be buried next to him. She would never remarry. And now let's finally answer the question you've been asking yourself this whole time. Did Carl Tanzler, really, not kidding, zombie baby jokes aside, did he fuck Elena's corpse? Well, for a long time, nobody knew. Stories about Tanzler circulated for years after his death, after all. Pretty wild story. And in the age of pulp magazines, it proved ample fodder for exaggeration and speculation of all sorts. But it was the Tropic Magazine article by John Dorschner that appeared on Sunday, March 5th, 1972, that would confirm something that had been whispered about for years. The author of the article interviewed Dr. DePoo, who belatedly told what he had found during Elena's autopsy. This one conducted after her body was taken out of Carl's home, nearly a decade after she'd actually died. And the doctor said regarding her lady parts, quote, "The breasts really felt real. In the vaginal area, I found a tube wide enough to permit sexual intercourse. At the bottom of the tube was cotton, and in an examination of the cotton, I found there was sperm. Then I knew we were dealing with a sexual pervert." Maybe Dr. DePoo would have been forced to disclose the results of the autopsy had Tanzler been brought to trial, but he never was, and the doctor didn't volunteer the information at the time, right? In 1940, a lot more taboo to talk about dude fucking a dead body. Making this less likely to be sensationalism, another doctor would confirm what that article claimed. The romantic necrophiliac of Key West, an article written by Dr. Foraker, said the following: "I attended this autopsy on the desiccated corpse, which had a reconstructed face, breasts, arms, legs, trunk, and vaginal tube constructed so that intercourse could be simulated." The doctor finished, "I have searched the 40 to 50 years of accumulation of literature in sex crimes and related problems and have found no case, as yet, similar to this one." So, for years, that sick fuck was fucking the corpse of a young woman who had never, ever even wanted to kiss him. Someone who just wanted to live without him. Someone whose family wouldn't have given him the time of day had they not been poor and desperate to keep her alive. But you knew that, right? You knew that he wasn't just having non-sexual sleepovers with that corpse, just like you knew that Michael Jackson wasn't having non-sexual sleepovers with a lot of the kids he groomed. Why is MJ catching a stray right now? Well, probably just because he's on my mind, thanks to that Thriller reference. Bum, 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 ba-na. Ba-na-na. And with that, let's get out of the zombie-filled timeline.
Good job, soldier. You made it back. Barely.
Carl Tanzler, what a creepy fucker. One of the funniest things to me about this episode is that since most of the information about how Tanzler grew up, came to America, met Elena, lived alongside her corpse, comes from Tanzler himself, he should have been able to present himself in the best light possible to make it seem like, maybe he was doing kind of a good thing in some way. And yet he still comes across as a completely batshit insane creep. Still comes across as an asshole. Why? Because there is no way for this story to not come across as crazy and creepy. Dead bodies are dead, and the fact that they are something to be disposed of safely for health risks and for the mental well-being of those they leave behind is literally encoded into our human functioning. Indeed, the sensation that drives us away from a dead body is an evolutionary survival mechanism called the behavioral immune system, a suite of various psychological adaptations designed to detect the presence of disease-causing parasites and pathogens, triggering a strong emotional response of disgust. It's that disgust that has prevented us and our ancestors from lingering around corpses largely, therefore minimizing our exposure to whatever killed the person. It's a survival instinct. The way to bury them or otherwise dispose of bodies, the traditions around that process have always varied from culture to culture, and there are some cultures, like the Toraja of Indonesia, who keep the bodies of their deceased relatives inside their homes for weeks or months or even years, while they save up the money. The expensive water buffalo required for an elaborate funeral requires. Every few years, families practice a second funeral. They exhume their ancestors from their stone tombs, clean the mummies, brush the hair, dress them in fresh clothes, sometimes add in accessories like sunglasses, which I've seen in videos on YouTube. and they walk them to the village to take new family photos. And it's fucking creepy. These cultures demonstrate that human culture can clearly entirely override biological programming by teaching children from a newborn age that an ancestral corpse is a safe, a fucking thing to have around. The psychological disgust mechanisms are replaced with feelings of comfort, duty, deep emotional connection. But to go against this instinct when you haven't been raised that way, living in a culture where people do that regularly and have for, fucking generations, that requires a deeply different mind than most people have. And by all accounts, Carl Tanzler had that such mind. This, in all likelihood, was present from the beginning. From the first time he latched on to the story of the white woman that his mom perhaps told him as a child. Rather than feel fear or disgust or unease, Carl felt desire, attraction, maybe even lust for the dead. It is possible that no matter what era he'd been born into, Carl would have done something deeply strange when it came to dead women. But there are a few unique factors that made the time he lived in particularly aligned to his sensibilities. For one, there was the newly booming funeral industry, right? We talked about that during the Civil War. As soldiers and their families wanted bodies returned home for burial, new techniques emerged to preserve those bodies, including an arsenic-based fluid pumped through the corpse's arteries, which resulted in them looking remarkably lifelike, almost like they were sleeping. For many people, the display of bodies, what we now call an open casket funeral, became a key part of the grieving process, allowing families to spend time with their loved ones before the burial. By the time of Jessica Mitford's essay on funeral practice, however, that had expanded to making the bodies better. Funeral homes used specialized products to erase signs of illness that had taken them, plumping their cheeks, giving them what essentially amounted to a tan they may have never had in life. And all of this introduced a new level of psychological complexity. How do you balance your instinct to get away from a dead body with your love for the person who was once encased in that body? And how do you navigate those things when the body looks so remarkably lifelike, especially in the case of tuberculosis, where beauty standards were literally rearranged around the appearances of those infected with this fatal illness? This experimentation with embalming also may have made it seem, especially to the wider world that didn't know as much about medical or funeral technology, that if you could make the body look like itself, or even look better, bringing the body back to life, maybe not that far off. Indeed, many people would come to think that Carl Tanzler may have been on the verge of a scientific breakthrough, if only he had been given more time. In reality, though, Tanzler was up to something much worse. We know now, thanks to the candor of a few physicians, that he was having sex with Elena's body, which makes him more of a Jeffrey Dahmer-type ghoul than it does some kind of Dr. Frankenstein, corpse reviver, or Albert Einstein-like genius. Also, which stories about what Carl tried to do with Elena's corpse were even true? Did he spend as much time trying to bring Elena back as he claimed? Did he really experiment on her that much? Or was he spending most of his time satisfying his own dark, perverse, carnal urges? Did he really think Elena wanted him to protect her body? Or did he come up with that when so much of the world started to view his story as romantic? Was he a deeply strange, mentally unwell person who had somehow convinced himself that his love story was one for the ages? Or was he more like all the other dirtbags we've covered here? Did a culture that wanted romance in the wake of the Great Depression and the beginning of World War II simply see what they wanted to see in Tanzler? And Tanzler eagerly took them up on that. And most importantly, did he bring a number of zombie babies to life and kick most of them into the sewer? Did he just abandon them like he'd abandoned his living human children? Are those zombie babies still somewhere down in the Florida swamps? Should we be looking for them? Are they related to Florida Man? We'll probably never know the answers to a lot of these very important questions. In the absence of that, all we can say is rest in peace, Elena de Hoyos. Hopefully the rest of her family is resting in peace as well, together somewhere, getting to enjoy music and family the way they did in life, and not having their corpses fucked by some psychotic necrophile ghoul. Time for today's takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Number 1. The mysterious, possibly quite educated, possibly aristocratic, although possibly none of those things, Carl Tanzler became obsessed with Elena de Hoyos as soon as he met her, believing her to be the mysterious figure, the white woman entity from his childhood, a spectral, ghostly woman that was, promised to him, if we can believe that. Number 2, Elena de Hoyos was never into Carl at all. Even based on Tanzler's memoir recollections, we still know she didn't like him like he liked her. She might not have liked him at all, not even platonically. Tanzler wrote that she loved the gifts he gave her and enjoyed his company, but did she? Did she actually take the gifts because she liked them or liked him, or because, for whatever reason, she felt it would be rude not to? He proposed to her many times. She never accepted. She claimed that was because, in God's eyes, she was already married. But was that true? I doubt it. I think she was just being nice. She was less than half his age, way out of his league. She looked like a beauty queen, truly, and he truly looked like a guy who would rob a grave and fuck a beauty queen's corpse. Number 3, Key West, back in the day, was an interesting place. While known primarily for being one of the homes of writer Ernest Hemingway, Key West's unique way of life was embraced by many of its residents, who sometimes held normal jobs, like working in the area's cigar factories, but often went without steady work and fished for abundant seafood. Just scavenged for food, found shipwreck supplies that they traded for food, slept outside, made do with whatever they could scrounge around from, what they could find. Very eccentric place. Number 4, Carl's infamy stretched far beyond Key West thanks to press coverage of the wild story, news of Elena's mummification, and how Tanzler had essentially lived alongside a dead body for 7 years, spread across the country, and the reception was largely positive. Yeah, most people fell along fell into one of two camps. Either they believed that Carl, given the proper time and equipment, actually could resurrect Elena, or they believed that what Tanzler did was unbelievably romantic. They didn't know about the special equipment, though, that he had set up with her, so he could have sex with her dead body, to be fair. On the second issue, some of the blame undoubtedly goes to the cultural iconography, including movies like Casablanca, that presented persisting, undying love as the most romantic thing possible. Do you think that's what Carl was, a hopeless romantic? I hope not. And number 5, new info. Of course, many of us have probably heard stories of people who have come back from the dead, aka been resuscitated after their heart has stopped beating, meaning they've been brought back from cardiac death, as doctors call it. But that usually has to happen pretty quickly, as opposed to, years after you've died, after your eyes have rotted out of your head, and have glass ones and weigh 40 pounds. Generally, spending more than 30 minutes dead and coming back without major brain damage is incredibly rare. But in some specific circumstances, people have been resuscitated after many hours and made a full recovery. This happens in cases where cardiac arrest has been combined with hypothermia. Hypothermia occurs when the core body temperature drops below 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and on its own, it can be very dangerous, causing the heart and lungs to fail, which of course eventually leads to death. But if the heart has already stopped on its own, hypothermia can actually have some upside. Cold temperatures slow down the body's metabolism, protecting our delicate brain cells from dying after using up all their oxygen. The longest known reported case of successful resuscitation after cardiac arrest and accidental hypothermia for a full neurological recovery is of a 31-year-old man, identified in sources only as Roberto, during an attempt to climb the face of Marmolada in the Italian Dolomites on August 26, 2017. And the Dolomites, by the way, gorgeous mountains. My God. Roberto and his climbing partner, identified in sources as Alessandro, caught off guard by a freezing summer thunderstorm. When Alessandro clambered to safety, Roberto tried, but then became trapped beneath a freezing waterfall and experienced hypothermic cardiac arrest, plunging his internal temperature to 79 degrees. A helicopter rescue team soon winched him from the face of the mountain before beginning resuscitation efforts. Didn't seem like things were going to go well. Once Roberto was at the hospital, though, he was placed on a life support system that maintained fresh blood flow for 5 hours, and he was eventually warmed and successfully resuscitated after a whopping 8 hours and 42 minutes spent technically dead. That's fucking crazy. He came back after that. Now, nearly all of that time, his heart was being pumped by either CPR efforts or equipment in the helicopter or hospital, but still, after 3 months, doctors reported that Roberto had completely recovered with no sustained neurological damage, but he did have minor amnesia, which is a bummer because now he can't tell us about what crazy shit he might have seen on the other side. This story, crazy as it sounds, has been reported on numerous legitimate sites, right? And it's in the Guinness Book of World Records. Not sure if anybody fucked him before he was brought back, by the way, and quickly made another zombie baby. Sources surprisingly quiet on that.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Carl Tanzler, romantic necrophiliac, has been sucked. Thanks to the Bad Magic Productions team for help in making Timesuck. Thanks to Queen of Bad Magic, Lindsay Cummins, to Logan Keith, helping to publish this episode and designing merch for the store at badmagicproductions.com. Thank you to Sophie Evans for some excellent research. Also, thanks to the All-Seeing Eyes, moderating the Cult of the Curious private Facebook page, the Mod Squad, making sure Discord keeps running smooth, and everyone over in the Timesuck subreddit and Bad Magic subreddit. And now let's head on over to this week's Timesucker updates.
Updates? Get your Timesucker updates.
All right, Meat Sacks, as promised last week, some follow-up messages sent in to Bojangles at timesuckpodcast.com that I did not get to last updates. First up, one from an anonymous sack. This is a huge message, even bigger reply. It's like 10 messages in one and 10 replies. I really had to think about it. It is essentially a short suck that I've snuck into the updates. It was sent in with a subject line of strong feelings and curiosity. And this anonymous person wrote, and I just feel like it was a lot of things they talked about here that showed up in a lot of other emails and parts. And so it's just kind of easier to just list them all out in one. They wrote, "Hey, I want to start this email with, I am truly a meat sack. I haven't always agreed on some things here, but I have also heard logic and was happy to change my opinion or even beliefs based on listening to you and our fellow meat sacks who have written in. The most recent topic, Stonewall riots, seem like the time to ask / share my frustration and possibly get eye-opening information. First, I don't see gay or lesbian as the same as transgender. I know they share the same acronym, but they seem way different to me, as someone who is neither. I will be using the word mental illness for transgender because it makes the most sense for me right now. And I'm not going to replace or comment on any of their words as I go through here. I am 100% open to hearing out why I'm wrong or a different way of thinking. I do want love for everyone. You love whomever you want, stay away from kids and animals, dress how you want, do whatever makes you happy until it affects others. This is where I have issue with the trans community over the gay community. Like you said, if you don't like it, don't look. I find if I don't go to gay clubs or pride parties, it is not pushed into my face or affects my life. Letting two people getting married and wanting to live in love together and possibly adopt children to raise with love and care, this is all positive in my heart. Don't care if they're the same sex, what they want to dress or pretend to be the other gender. If you're just trying to live a happy, peaceful life, all good. I also share the same opinions with the trans community. Do whatever your heart is content. Do whatever makes you feel happy. However, unlike the gay community, the trans community do make me angry and uncomfortable. I will repeat, I am open to hearing the other side. First, as a woman and a mother of girls, the fact that a man can come into my or her bathroom is very uncomfortable for me, even if you are truly just there because your heart says you are a girl and that makes you feel right or happy. I don't want you there. Unless you're good, I don't, but unfortunately, that has not been my experience. Twice it was clear you were a man and it made me uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is one thing, but also you know that creep are going to use anything they can to creep. We shouldn't have to risk mine or my daughter's safety, so other people whose brain says they are the sex they are not just because they want to be in there, which also falls in line with the school interactions. Kindergarten through 12th grade students should not be schooled on sex, gender identity, sexual orientation. It should not be a thing. Don't get me wrong if your parents made it clear being gay was not an option, or if you have to be a boy, if you feel like a girl. Yes, you absolutely should see the school counselor, but again, this is not a whole class issue. Most humans know pretty quickly if they like dick or pussy or both pretty naturally. Don't need a class or a club reaffirming that, just support. I was such a tomboy from birth to like 9th grade, someone could have easily wanted to convince me I was a boy in those formative years. You are really a boy because you like pants and mountain bikes and climbing trees. You're a boy. No, I was just a different kind of girl. So give dumb children hormones or hormone blockers classes on who they are. It is so frustrating. The next thing still really bothers me, but not as much as the sharing of my bathroom, is sharing sports. There is a good reason why there is an NBA and a WNBA, not all built the same. Men are physically stronger by nature, and that's okay. But it's so fucked for a man to dominate in any woman's sports. I just heard about a change that if a trans win, that runner-up women will share the first place. Fuck that. If a girl worked her butt off to do well in that sport, she should get the spotlight and pride alone. She, and I am thinking of my daughter, my time has passed, will not have a chance up against a male. We are so strong in our own ways. I gave birth to 2 babies, and I can guarantee you that was not easy. My husband, having seen it from beginning to end, not just giving birth, but carrying for months, breastfeeding, post-recovery. It's not easy work, and thankfully he understands. Which leads me to the last and least offensive thing, but still hits me the wrong way. Being called that a cis woman, I'm a motherfucking woman. I gave birth twice, dealt with hormones and periods and all these things. It chaps my ass to hear cis women, because you have a mental illness, I have to share my bathroom, my sports, and my women. I know there's a chance I'm wrong or not seeing the big picture because I've experienced it before. I also wouldn't be butthurt about hearing the other side. I may not be seeing things because I feel like learning, growing, sometimes changing makes us better meat sacks, and that is what I want for me and my kids. I don't write this as a way to feed into nasty negative energy, but my honest feelings and frustration. I do that to understand, and I know we have have transgender who listen. I don't want them to think I hate them because I was walking in the store. I would smile and greet them because the fact that they want to live away or exist isn't what bothers me. I'm so grateful for this podcast. I will listen and do my best to learn from all of them. P.S. Sorry for the bad grammar. Anonymous. Okay, Anonymous. Lot to unpack here. A lot to unpack. First, thank you for taking the time to write all that down, to ask questions about things that admittedly make you feel uncomfortable. Thank you for being open. Thank you more for being open to hearing the other side. Again, you packed about 10 emails worth of questions into that one there. I'm going to do my best to address it all. So first up, you spoke of transgender as a mental illness. Is it? To begin to answer this, the people who have studied this the most do not think so. No major medical and or psychological organization, including the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, the WHO, the World Health Organization, consider being transgender to be a mental illness, and that does matter. I get very frustrated in our current society about the attack on credibility of experts. It does matter. One of the pillars of an advanced civilization is having citizens able to do specialized work, to be able to gain specialized information, in various fields, and then share that with the rest of society and have society largely trust them. Are experts sometimes wrong? Of course, all humans are. But are they more likely to be correct about their area of expertise than somebody who is not an expert? Yes. That's where a lot of people get wonky currently, in my opinion. I think if we stop believing that, we become the societal equivalent of a nation of flat earthers, right? A nation of QAnon believing, lizard Illuminati fearing ignorant motherfuckers. And anyone who doesn't believe that, if you don't think expertise matters, well, then how about you start taking your car into a dentist when it doesn't start properly? Maybe try and get your cavities fixed at the muffler place, right? Expertise, it really does matter a lot. Also, let's say that you're right. Let's just go with this possibility that you're right and it is a mental illness. How should that affect their rights? And I'll just say, should someone with paranoid schizophrenia not be allowed to marry, not be allowed to have kids, not be allowed to use a public bathroom because they might have an extreme mental health episode that could make people uncomfortable or scared? I doubt you'd want that. Even if it was a mental illness, why demonize it like we used to demonize people with afflictions like schizophrenia because we did? And it was cruel. Doesn't it seem cruel to do something like that again? Now, next, and this is part of that same thing for you, I know, are bathrooms dangerous because of transgender people? We've covered a lot of serial killers over the years, a lot of sexual predators. How many times have we come across a man dressing up as a woman in order to access women's public bathrooms specifically, and then, once inside that bathroom, sexually assault somebody coming in to use that bathroom? To the best of my memory, 0 times. And I bring that up to illustrate an important point. A well-lit public bathroom is not the kind of place, if you can look into the stats on this, it is not the kind of place deranged perverts, sexual predators tend to target. It is not where they tend to do their hunting. Why not? Because it is too public. Too much risk of being caught, right? We just think about this logically. If someone has a choice between a fucking dark alley, if they can sneak into somebody living alone, their home late at night, or walk into the fucking, Kroger or Fred Meyer's bathroom in the middle of the day, what are they going to do? They're going to do the stuff where there's less people around. There's too great a chance that somebody will hear the victim scream or barge in during the act of the assault. I Googled the following question, quote, how many times has a man dressed as a woman sexually assaulted a stranger in the women's public bathroom? This is the summary that came back, verbatim. There is no specific statistical registry tracking this exact scenario. However, extensive archival research and investigations by legal, academic, and anti-violence organizations indicate that such incidents are extraordinarily rare and isolated events rather than a systemic phenomenon. Basically, while it is not impossible, it is not nearly as likely, statistically, as, say, being raped by a stranger while trying to get into your car at night in a dark parking lot. It is far, 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 far less statistically likely that than, you or your daughter being raped by a family member, a family friend, or someone in a position of authority over your child, like a coach, pastor, or babysitter. Also, there are plenty of unisex bathrooms. Just think about this, right? Now, forget about everything I just said. There are plenty of unisex bathrooms all over the country that people use all the time without incident. I've used them in hotels, restaurants, concerts, etc., places that have to carry liability insurance, places that would never have unisex bathrooms if that opened them up to, being sued more frequently, if it put their patrons in danger, because of the increased risk. At the Hotel Wren in Missoula, Montana, been there many times, at the lobby floor, lobby level, an extension of the lobby, they have a big multi-stall unisex bathroom. All right, you walk, anybody can walk in. Man, woman, doors open, you walk in, then you walk into your stall, close the door, then you come back out and you wash your hands. And I have used this in a stall next to a little girl in the stall next to me. We've washed our hands in the sink side by side. She didn't seem scared. Her parent out there didn't seem scared. My son's dorm in his first 2 years of college, their entire floor shared a unisex bathroom with not only multiple stalls for going to the bathroom, but also multiple showers. Individual showers guarded only by a plastic shower curtain. Young men, young women showering in adjacent stalls with no locking doors. Never heard about a single incident of assault or someone peeping on the person in the next stall over. And again, if that was really a big problem, the school would not do that just for liability reasons alone. Take political ideologies, take everything. Just think about fucking money. They wouldn't do that because they'd be sued all the time. Never heard about kids complaining, right? They adapted. It was fine. Finally, I go to a lot of music festivals last couple of years. Music festivals with row after row of porta potties. And those are used by everybody. Men, women, boys, girls. It's fine. Actually, I said finally, but one more. Just got back from Germany visiting Kyler. Europe, it is the norm now to have unisex bathrooms in many places. No one seems to fucking care because it's not an issue. This is I don't want to discount your fear, but this is, in my opinion, a boogeyman fear. In a logical, kind of like we're worried about the witch out in the woods type fear. I don't think it's logical. I think it's a type of fear that is stoked intentionally by fear-mongering, manipulative politicians and political operatives largely. And regarding your anger over this, well, I think I know why it leads you to feel angry. Allow me to nerd out and quote Star Wars. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. I know it can sound a little silly as a movie quote, but I don't think truer words have ever been spoken. Okay, next question. Should people be able to talk about their sexual preference in school? Yes, because it's not going to be explicit. Straight teachers reference having straight partners all the time. No one seems to have a problem with that. What they don't do is reference how they fuck their partners. Or at least if they do that, they tend to get in trouble. My kids, they knew that, this teacher is married to so-and-so, this other teacher is married to this so-and-so. It's not a problem. Queer teachers talking about being queer does not equate to saying shit like, so my male partner, John, and I, man, we sure love sucking each other's dicks, right, kids? You boys should try that. You should try it. Go ahead, suck each other's dicks. That's not happening because that's not happening on the straight side either. All that's happening and all that people want around this issue is to allow queer teachers and staff to just be able to talk about their lives in the same manner as straight teachers and staff can. Just to say a woman can say my wife and I went to Olive Garden. That's it. Not my wife and I were eating each other's pussies. It just gets twisted into these nonsensical scenarios. And again, pushed by fear-mongering political operatives and pundits. Doing that, just talking about their lives, that is no more akin to grooming, a word that I hate that gets thrown around in this context, than it is to straight people talking about their lives. Actually, one more thing on this issue, I've come across a lot of scandals where teachers have fucked their students. One of my friends in college was fucked by his teacher when he was a freshman. Big deal. She got fired and went to jail. Every time I've ever heard of this kind of thing happening, these sexual impropriety, it's always been with straight people. It's always been with straight teachers. So why are we disproportionately worried about transgenders or any queer staff, right? Fear. Refer again to my Star Wars quote. Next up, should a transgender or gay student be allowed to have a club at school? You reference these clubs. Yes, because joining them is not mandatory. My kid's public high school has more than one, or their former high school now, had more than one Christian clubs. No one scientifically is born Christian. That's a fact, actually. Being religious of any sort is 100% a choice. Hard stop. So not letting people of another belief, the scientific community believe did not make a choice to be queer. When you do let other clubs exist that are based entirely on choice, that is blatant hypocrisy. You also mentioned that at one point during your formative years, somebody could have actually convinced you that you were a boy. But is that true? I would argue that it is not, unless you are actually transgender. When it comes to these things, you can't be talked into anything. And again, this goes back to these notions of grooming. No one's going to talk your straight kid into being gay. That's just not a fucking thing, right? And if you think it is and you're actually straight, try to imagine a scenario where somebody could just fucking sweet talk you into putting the opposite of the genitals you like in your mouth and sucking on them. No, it doesn't work that way. I could care less about anybody being queer. I love hanging out, going on vacation with a gay friend of mine and his gay partner. I've crashed in the same bed as him when we were young and poor. Could he have ever talked me into sucking his dick? And I love this guy. Love this man. Could he have talked me into sucking his dick while we were there? No. I'm just not interested. No amount of persuasion at any point in my life could make me do that, which is part of why I just don't care about it. I don't think anybody is being talked into being queer again. And that's backed up by a lot of studies that that's not how it works. So these clubs, they are not a threat. They're just a nice place for these kids to be able to go and, and not feel so alone and maybe have the, suicidal ideation drop somewhat. Two more things. Should transgender women be allowed into women's sports? I don't think so, actually. I don't think so, and this issue makes me sad for transgender athletes. Someone born with male musculature does have a physical advantage that is oftentimes impossible to overcome. The heaviest all-time raw bench press, no lifting equipment being used, by a male, 355 kilograms, which is just over 782 pounds, achieved by this guy in 2021. Heaviest all-time raw bench press by a woman, 207.5 kilograms, just over 457 pounds in 2016. Huge fucking difference, due primarily to anatomical structure. Men have more upper body muscle fibers, on average, a lot more than women. Fastest ever male time in the mile, 3 minutes, 43 seconds, 13 hundredths of a second. Fastest ever mile run by a woman, 4 minutes, 6 seconds, 42 hundredths of a second. That's a big difference between elite athletes. And think about it in terms of MMA. If male and female elite fighters were put in the octagon together, women would start being literally killed or regularly end up with brain damage due to the difference in raw, explosive violence. It's not just the same, you know? Stat after stat will tell you that if, you're willing to look at it with no emotion, there is a substantial difference between male and female athletes. I do think we should work towards the creation of special leagues for trans athletes. We should not demonize them. It is such a complex issue because it is different for each sport. Way too much to get into here. But I didn't want to duck the question. I definitely don't think it is okay to berate, to send hateful DMs to leave hateful comments on trans athletes' accounts. There is no good reason to be cruel about it, right? No need to be a bully. We can all work to find the most compassionate solution with grace. And finally, is anybody trying to take your title of woman from you? I don't think they are. Your motherhood, your sacrifice, your feminine strength, your beauty can still be celebrated just the same, regardless of how this issue unfolds. I look at this like I've looked at gay marriage versus straight marriage. Gay marriage is not a mockery of straight marriage like some people think. It is just another marriage. I personally don't give a fuck who else is married when it comes to how I view my marriage. I don't base my marriage on anybody else's marriages. I don't care about stuff like that absurd complaint of like, well, if we just open it up for everybody, what if two dogs get married? Even that absurd scenario, all right, well, fucking good for those dogs. I don't fucking care. I mean, their dog brains can't, recognize that concept, but I don't fucking care. I'm just trying to focus on being married to my wife. Hard to stop. Don't fucking care what anybody else is doing. I like being a man. Much like I imagine I would enjoy being a woman if I was born that way. I don't care if someone born a woman becomes a man. It doesn't affect my manhood whatsoever. It takes nothing away from my identity. It is just a word to me, a social construct. I care far more, and I wish more people cared far more about just being a good human. Stop. Just be a good human. Stop. Who fucking cares what gender you were born, right? You didn't fucking hit the lottery by doing that. It's just how you happen to be born. Just like where you're from doesn't really matter. You didn't fucking do anything, work for anything to get there. You just ended up there. And you can be proud of it, but to identify that way, why? Just identify as being a good person. Does anything else fucking matter? Right? Just be a good meat sack. I don't know. You'll always be a woman, but again, it's more important, I think, to be a good person. Okay. And I know this is fucking turning into a suck of a tone now, like I said. I hope my thoughts at the very least, I hope they didn't offend you. I hope they didn't push you away. And I just hope they just made you think about this in a different light, right? I'm just sharing what my feelings on all this. I think we should all reevaluate from time to time what we are mad about, what we are afraid of. I do that. And oftentimes I'm like, why the fuck have I cared about that? I am being silly and I let it go and I just feel better. Is my anger valid? Or is it the result of me just not understanding something, not looking at it from a different, maybe, very valid, more empathetic perspective? Okay. Next up, another anonymous, and thank you again for asking, hard questions. Next up, another anonymous. The first one was not anonymous, actually, but I just wanted to protect them from, somebody possibly lashing out who didn't like the way they asked questions. This one was sent in with the subject line of, Dan, you disgusting motherfucker. Dear Suckmaster, I will get to the explanation of the subject line momentarily, but I just wanted to say a very big thank you. Thank you for all the knowledge you dump into our ears on a regular basis. Thank you for the recent Stonewall suck, and thank you very much for your honesty and vulnerability you shared at the end of the episode. I am a queer, trans, non-binary meat sack. Feels so good to be able to live out and proud, and I feel very fortunate, as I know that not everyone has that luxury or the love and support I've been fortunate enough to have. There is still so far to go, but progress has been made. That being said, I fear public restrooms and the gym locker room, and the side glances and stares are just a constant fact I deal with. That being said, using your platform to promote love and acceptance and basic human decency means so much to so many people. On to the subject line, for background, I work in a lab processing human blood and blood products. There are a few coworkers who got me into the Timesuck. It'd be cool if we could be called your blood suckers. Anyway, dealing with blood and blood products, there are a lot of tasks that involve shaking bags of liquid. I've been haunted for months since whatever godforsaken episode it was, I don't even want to know which one it was, in which you constantly played the sound clip of a man masturbating. The wet, nasty sound too often sounds like a bag of liquid being sloshed around. Now to connect the subject line and my appreciation of the Pride Sucked, as a non-binary meat sack without a penis, who is not attracted to penises, every once in a while, I just get so disgusted at work, my mind is attacked with thoughts and images of that clip while just trying to get through my day and save lives. So thank you for that. Just hoping Lucifina blesses me someday with a nice hoingy-boingy oofta girl. Anyway, thanks for all you do to fight ignorance and idiocy while providing entertainment. Sorry for the length of the email, 3 out of 5 stars. Would not change a thing. Thank you, Anonymous. Well, thank you, Bloodsucker. I so wanted to play that clip again to gross you out, but I won't. It actually upsets myself, too. I don't even, this is too much information, which I always do here. I don't even like to hear myself jerk off. Seriously, I have to play music, or I'll just get so disgusted, I'll just give up. Also, so glad that overall you feel things are moving in a good direction. Selfishly, I wanted to share your message, mostly to hear about the bathroom/locker room thing from your perspective. All right? I can't imagine how fucking nervous you get going into those places where people are like, whoa, what are they doing here? And you're just like, I don't know, just fucking trying to get out of my sweaty clothes or take a shit. I feel like that perspective needed to be shared. Keep doing good stuff with good blood. And finally, an international sucker has a lovely message from Dutch sucker, Ilonka. I think I'm saying thank you for the pronunciation guide in your name, by the way. Ilonka. Yes, Ilonka. Send it with the subject line of a lesbian thank you. Hi, Dan and the Timesuck team. I love you, but fuck you for making me cry at the end of the Stonewall Suck, you asswipe. The love from Monroe, the stories about your friends and family. This little lesbian's heart is full. Actually, when I started this little heart of mine, okay. I live in the Netherlands, and I've been insanely lucky in that regard. My parents told me from a young age you could love anyone. Aw. So I never felt the need to truly come out. Even at 13, when I said I was bisexual, I was never bullied about that. Other things, yes, but not that. At 18, I knew I only liked women romantically. But again, never a problem. Not at the jobs I've had, not in society. I'm now 33, married to my wife for 6 years, and we have a fantastic 3.5-year-old daughter. I truly wish this kind of normalcy for all my LGBTQ plus family all over the world. Love should be simple. Being who you are should be simple. Thank you for being such an ally and an amazing dad. Stay fierce, Ilonka. Oh, Ilonka, thanks for those kind words. And also the beautiful photo of you and your lovely lady. Yeah, you two are fucking adorable. Yeah, love between consenting adults should be simple. Life is short, right? And it's often ugly and full of pain. We should at least be able to seek shelter from the storm with somebody of our own choosing. So many people worried that the pride community is equated with some kind of moral collapse. And yet in the Netherlands, right, there is wide acceptance. Ilonka is free to be who she is. Last I checked, the Netherlands still a great, safe, beautiful place to live. Not full of fucking demons flying around and, monsters in the streets. It's almost like fear over all of this. It's just ignorance, right? It's just confusion. It's just fear, right? Turning into anger, turning into hate. So let's not be ignorant. Let's be loving. Thanks for all the other messages from people living, out of the closet, people long in the closet, messages from former Christians, current Christians, people who have never been religious, from straight listeners, trans listeners, gay, lesbian listeners, asexual listeners, etc. Truly, so many messages just keep coming in, so many perspectives, so much love. Hail Nimrod to you all.
Next time, suckers. I needed that.
We all did.
Well, thank you for listening to another Bad Magic Productions podcast. Be sure and rate and review Timesuck if you haven't already. And please, just like I said last week, don't have sex with a corpse. Just don't do it. It's too kinky. It's a bad kink, right? You actually are gross. You should be ashamed of yourself. Just go to a therapist and keep on sucking.
Bad Magic Productions.
Last thing, can someone please add ghost cuck to Urban Dictionary? Please. I don't have time. Do any of you have the time to add ghost cuck to Urban Dictionary? Right? Ghost cuck, defined as a person who gets turned on by either watching someone else have a sexual experience with a spirit or specter, or by watching two ghosts fuck. Ghost cuck.